commerce agency. By understanding how, when, and why people buy, VMLY and ECommerce delivers the most engaging and culturally relevant creative commerce experiences across retail, experience, design, and innovation. They do this as a part of a network of 12,000 specialists across 80 countries, everywhere life intersects with commerce. This is end to end. We are so excited to have her with us today. Hi, Beth Ann. Oh, yes, I think we have, if you could just unmute.
Oh, there we go, of course. I was trying to be careful while you were talking so there would be no background noise. But how are you? Thank you for having us.
It's so great to have you back on stage. You have been a regular since we started a year ago with virtual programming, and I'm just so excited for you guys to bring this great content to our community today.
Well, we really appreciate you having us. We appreciate the partnership and keeping so much focus on the commerce content this whole season. So we've really had great conversations, and then today to go really deep and have a broader focus just on this area.
Wonderful. Yeah. And so I know that you're going to have a fireside chat here in just a second, but would love a couple words on just what the future of commerce means to you and to your team. And then, we'll have Barry join you in just a second.
Yeah, so, at VMLY and ECommerce, when we think about the future of commerce, we've been focused on the creative opportunity that's been exploding in our space for a long time. And particularly as we move into newer channels, e-commerce is not that new, but there's been such a dramatic shift by our consumers into that space, which forces all of us into thinking not just about a channel management approach, but much more of a unified approach. So we like to elevate the creative potential in our space and recognize that from a consumer standpoint, they're not distinguishing between upper funnel, lower funnel channels. They're thinking about it in terms of brands driving emotional engagement and meeting their needs in the moment. So every chance that we get it to build brand equity, to elevate the experience, to bring the consumer in a way that they are contributing to the creativity and the engagement in the space, and then being motivated and inspired to act, to purchase, to convert, is the way we're focused on the space. So I'm very excited today. We have many different talks across the afternoon from the Coca-Cola company, which we're going to start off with in a moment, the Conagra Brands, Dell Technologies, TD Bank, and Ferrara. And what I like about the people that we are going to be talking to today is they really represent the cross section, not just of consumer packaged goods and FMCG brands, but really across sectors. And you can see how they're all thinking about commerce in different unique ways that are critical to the success of their business. So with that, I'm going to kick us off with my friend Barry Thomas, incredible client partner, and someone that you all should, if you're not right now following and getting to know in the industry, you should. He is really forward thinking, so a perfect person to be talking about the future of commerce. He is the head of customer marketing at the Coca-Cola company and leads their future of commerce practice. So welcome, Barry. Great to have you with us today.
Hey, thank you, Beth Ann. And it was great to be with you guys at your last Global Summit a couple of weeks ago, which got great reviews from everybody I was talking to. And of course, I was on that a little bit.
So let's get right into it. Your title is customer marketing, and that has taken on many different definitions through the evolution of commerce. As we think about the future of commerce, I would love for you just to start there. What does customer marketing mean to you, your role, and to the Coca-Cola company today?
Sure. Well, in many ways, it hasn't changed so much because we're still trying to create value as the customer or the partner would define value. However, the context has clearly changed, and that's a big part of our work. We do have a future of commerce capability, if you will, that we share with customers and partners as we think about growth in the short term and the long term. And at Coca-Cola, we're just very fortunate to have so many different partners like yourself and so many others to really have some pretty proprietary research and perspectives on the topic. So just real quickly, Beth Ann, if I had to say, quick context here would be just the move to ecosystems. The top 5 global customer retailers by 2025 will control about 30% of all commerce. and 50% of growth. And those are folks like Walmart, Amazon, Alibaba, JDD, Pinduoduo, et cetera. So kind of a big deal. And so how we operate with customers is a little different in that context. Secondly, last mile providers are very understated in many cases. They're incredibly important. So how we partner with customers, that's a big part of the narrative. Someone like Rappi or Instacart here in North America, they're the first and last moment of truth in so many ways. And so we, as a brand and working with a customer, we have to find the right synergies to drive value from that perspective. And then just lastly, the acceleration of online to offline continues to ramp up in new and innovative ways. There's many different types of commerce innovations that are happening, many of those coming in from China. And underneath all of that is really enterprise technology and AI and automation. Probably the biggest factor that we're sort of prepping for, if you will, is AI and automation. There's probably nothing bigger in commerce in terms of what's changing the landscape going forward.
Could not agree more. And we're going to get into that change, just really dive into the conversation around the different forces at play right now. We both have been through this acceleration. It's interesting when people talk about an acceleration happening because of COVID, because really what's changed is nothing that we weren't already predicting. It's just that it's all happened in a very consolidated, faster pace than anyone was ever expecting. And we know, like, consumers are usually the ones that are driving new trends. They're the ones that are forcing marketers to pay attention in new ways and for us to meet them where they are. And it was really that, critical mass moving on through technology with a complete behavior shift of becoming much more of a digital shopper, right? I mean, even in categories like your own, where I think sometimes people would have predicted certain segments of the population would maybe never have moved online. So we've also been looking at different ways of trying to make sense of new frameworks, new ways of thinking about this evolution, these trends, and the pace of trends and the speed of which things are occurring. And so I would love to hear from you about some of those influences. What are some of the things that you look at to shape the frameworks that you apply for Coke? And I know one of the ones that you and I both looked at is sort of the generation of generation of commerce and context. And I think we're at generation 4 right now. When we think about like what shaped, first and second, it was really around convenience and value being offered through this idea of like one-stop shop. And then 3 brought on this focus leveraging data on, newer, lower pricing strategies and newer ways of thinking about transparency of pricing and how we offer value to consumers. And now we're moving into sort of this wave of the 4th generation. How are you applying this kind of thinking in this framework to shape the work that you do at the Coca-Cola Company?
Sure. Well, Generation 4 commerce, which is sort of the context we're in now, much like the previous generations, in many ways didn't really create new demand. Walmart didn't necessarily create new demand. They just substituted demand. The same with Amazon. So this substitution factor is something we're going to continue to see more of going ahead. And as you go from one generation to the next, there's a new S curve. And as you go from one S curve to the next, S curve, you have to do a few things. So very, very big picture strategically, I have to reallocate, human capital and working capital. And that's kind of a difficult thing to do. In many cases, if you're a restaurant or a retailer, is how do I quickly, reallocate my people and capital to this new S curve? So that's one of the challenges and something we work with customers on. Additionally, you really want to upskill your associates. Clearly a pretty important matter. And so we help a bit with that. Probably in the history of commerce, I think many people would agree, it's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur, full stop. It's so much easier to get to the consumer. However, if you're a large enterprise, more than ever, you have to be an entrepreneur. If you're working at a big Fortune 500 company, you must be acting like an entrepreneur. In many cases, in many of the most categories, these micro brands, these Explorer and Challenger brands are taking disproportionate share. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of them is they're entrepreneurs and they're moving at unprecedented speeds and they're so digitally and native. So this is a lot of the context, for Generation 4. I think one competitive business model to think about, kind of stepping back and looking at generation 4 and kind of coming in, maybe it's too early to tell, but I've been at generation 5 is really 4 areas. If I'm running an enterprise, one, I'm definitely, moving to more data-rich platforms and collecting more data. It's more important than ever. I think we all know that. Restaurants and stores simply become, data hubs with sensors everywhere. Secondly, I'm going to overlay on that basically AI and automation, machine learning, deep learning, RPA in its simplest form. Because when I have the data, then I can do something with it when I have the algorithms, et cetera. However, this is where the breakdown usually happens with research we have, is if you don't really have enterprise agility, if I'm really not built to go fast and really take advantage of the insights today, create new demand today, have a demand center today, it's going to be a problem. So really being agile, moving quickly, real time is paramount. And then part of that also is acculturation, because you can have some of your members of your leadership team, frontline workers that are concerned about, AI, automation, it's replacing my work, but really you want to make that not a black box, you want to make that a glass box. And you're very transparent with the organization around how Cobot, about that, is going to be a part of your work going forward. You're going to work with bots and machines and algorithms to do your role. And more effectively, you're going to get more accomplished. And so this sort of competitive framework clearly is what the winners are sort of moving to. It's difficult because you do have to move capital and people to a new way of working, especially in the context of brands, challenger brands, which are pretty important. The last thing I would say just on AI and automation, more and more, there's no question about it, more decisions in commerce get made out of sight. That's a really big point. And in many, many cases, you're going to still sell to a merchant. I'm still going to go to the consumer. That's really important. I'm going to fly into Bentonville, Arkansas and work with Walmart. It's still going to happen. However, I'm also going to work with algorithms, and I'm going to learn how to understand algorithms. I'm going to learn how to influence algorithms, because it's required in my customer work with my restaurant chain, with my retailer, with my aggregator, but also to the consumer. Because if I don't understand the algorithm, almost like a search protocol, I'll never get to the consumer. So these new ways of working are here and now, and they only accelerate going forward.
It's very interesting, especially when you start thinking about this need to do it today, need to operate in real time. How does that happen when you're working also with partners? How does that happen when you're collaborating across data, your own data, maybe things that your partners are bringing into the data system to augment it further, and then the data that you're getting from your customer or your retailer partners? It feels like it's getting complex, but in some ways, perhaps if some of this is being automated, over time, it will be able to simplify. As to your point, we get into more agile ways of working. One thing that we found working with clients is that we would talk agility, but it was a concept, it was in the abstract. And one thing that happened over the last several months is people were forced into this thing called agility. And now they're taking a step back going, okay, wait a minute, actually what we're doing and how we're behaving internally, this is agile. So now it's a process of codifying and capturing what's changing, and then how can you do things to make sure that you're perpetuating it. So let's talk a little bit about that, the structures that need to change, the roles that need to change, and those strategies that are driving and making sure that you're able to perpetuate that change. I know that two of us both watch closely China. We both work closely in that area of the world too. And if you think about what Alibaba has done with new retail and just everything that they've done, constantly evolving their platform to reflect these kinds of changes. And if you can consider that they're out ahead, whether that be 3 months, 6 months, or a year, even as things accelerate in other parts of the world. Talk to me a little bit about that. How are you being inspired by some of that activity? And what are you doing internally to rethink some of your structures and your ability to adapt to these changes?
Well, a lot there. Good question. I would just say for me personally, you definitely want to study, let's just call it China commerce. And certainly there's 3 platforms there, JDD, and what they're doing with Walmart and the way they're working with Walmart there as a federation is a pretty important point. obviously all things Alibaba, New Retail, the Fresh Hippo store. And then PDD, Pinduoduo, is truly reinventing social commerce. If you want to kind of see what the future of social commerce is, it's not on Facebook. It's clearly what's happening with PDD in China, the way they're forming these buying groups with consumers. And we're just seeing new commerce models that have never been seen before. They're pretty effective, especially reaching sort of hinterland consumers in many cases, lower scale income consumers, which can often be left out. I think you still want to, be a student of traditional legacy brands that are definitely making the transition. Walmart is a wonderful case study, and William White, the gang over there doing is phenomenal. Obviously, Nike. I think Challenger and Explorer brands need to be, way up on the list of learning. And for me, I like Quip, Halo Top, Dirty Lemon, etc. Beyond that, I listen to a lot of earnings calls. I try to listen to 5 earnings calls a week of the big major platforms because they're so far ahead. And the terms they're using are just different, than sort of some of these other companies. And then most, folks I know are sort of starting to form learning circles. They're forming those formally, maybe with some customers and partners, or they're forming those internally, or, maybe an ecosystem of internal, external, et cetera. But I have a learning circle around AI and automation. I have a learning circle around brand management. And by being a real active learner and really leaning in, I think that's kind of how you really have to be positioned. Mm-hmm. And then frankly, just my own point of view, having started a startup, as a few years ago, if I was hiring today for a pretty senior marketing position, this is just my personal opinion, I would want someone who's led an entrepreneur brand or worked on an entrepreneur brand, because so many of my friends that are working at Fortune 400, 300 companies, it's required training to learn how to be an entrepreneur. Literally, like you're going online to learn how to be agile, to learn what an entrepreneur really is. So if you've never really done it, it can be a little harder. And so I think lastly, especially just for someone like myself who's a bit older, you have to unlearn. And that's something you're not going to hear probably a lot. What do I have to unlearn? Because many of the principles that I went to MBA school are outdated. They're based on generation 2 and generation 3 nomenclature and a different time. And so unlearning and relearning, I think, are critical as a part of that. These learning circles are powerful. They're done right.
Yeah, to that point, we also both are avid readers, and one of the books that we've talked a lot about that we both have read recently was Quantum Marketing by Raja Rajamanners, CMO of MasterCard. Couldn't probably be in a better position to see everything that is changing in commerce, from consumer buying patterns, why they buy. They sit on top of so much interesting data, and then they partner, of course, with so many interesting platforms. So they're sort of they've been at the heart of this change. And he uses his experience to bring about this thinking in this book that really does take you on this journey of kind of the fundamentals, as you say. How do we have to rethink some of those fundamentals? Why are some of them obviously still important to how we think about the future, but what is changing and how to think about all that change? I think I mentioned to you, I was laughing when you got to one of the final chapters on talking about the future CMO and the role that they have to play. And, I think it was like maybe 12 different aspects and attributes that CMO had to have to make the ideal person. It's probably a unicorn or, that needle in the haystack that you're looking for, but building, to your point, the team and the network that brings about that diversity of thinking and experience, and being able to take a beginner's mindset as you approach that. I would love to hear a bit more on your side, one, maybe some takeaways from that book, especially because it was broadly speaking about marketing, although it gets to the connectivity of marketing and sales and e-com. But how would you apply some of that, or how have you been applying it to your thinking around commerce? And with that, what are some other brands and companies that you admire?
Lot there. Let me just think, first, just in terms of, sort of mentors, if you will, or people that I'm following that I know that provide tremendous insight would be, for example, Jay Walker, who's with your larger group, Dan O'Connor, If you're not following him, I'd highly encourage it over with the Harvard Business School. Scott Galloway, I think we talked about that. Raja, some of these are, we don't kind of follow. I think the Insight group is really good in terms of some of the models that they're pitching. Clayton Christensen was the original founder there. I really like Kathy Wood in terms of investing. She's really outlined like 5 future tense, really platforms that will generate much of commerce going forward. Excuse me. And then, I think what Raja talks to is a bit around what they're also talking to in business schools today, and that is this idea of a dual transformation, Beth Ann. And so if you're a company today, obviously you want to be around in 2025, clearly, you really have to do 2 things. And Raja speaks to this a bit. I have to plan present forward. I've got to pay dividends and cash flow, and those are good things. And I have to sort of position the enterprise for the future. And so I have to have pilots and experimentation, and probably need to spend 20% of my time and capital on, initiatives that give me learning to think about how I want to, plan long term. And so I think most organizations are taking chapters from what Raja's doing now from Insight. And ultimately, the best case study here is Netflix. Netflix was, the form factor was pick, pack, and ship. I'm going to ship you these DVDs, and all along comes streaming. Much like what we talked about earlier, I'm being substituted, which is kind of what's happening Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3. I'm being substituted. So what do? It's an and proposition. I keep running the business as is because I need to generate revenue, profit, and I make the pivot to streaming. And as you do that, you have to build new skills, obviously. And so a lot of what Raja's outlining there, I think, is dead on. A couple of other things I would just point to, the brands I think that are really positioned to win most going forward, really are taking brand purpose seriously. I mean, it's more than just like a PowerPoint slide. They're really living the brand purpose. The research I see from Generation Z and what they're going to care about the next 20 years, that's way at the top, much more than millennials, et cetera. And frankly, they're going to be scorecarding us. Kind of a key point around ESG, environment, sociability. You're likely to see going forward, signals. It could be a shelf tag, it could be a digital tag on how this brand or SKU is good or bad for the world, for the planet. I think that really picks up significantly going forward. You can look to clues from Western Europe where we're starting to see some of this, but those are just some random thoughts as it relates to that.
To that last point, it's interesting because purpose was something that we used to think about in the realm of brand awareness and more upper funnel ways that we would think about building brands. And it's really become so much more important from a commercial lens. Like your point, there's, a wallet share that we're fighting for, and the consumer is really voting with their wallets. They're deciding, like, I'm not going to get behind this brand, not just in terms of preferences or what I might tweet about or influence my community around, but actually what I actually buy and what I feel good about having even in my refrigerator. Are there things that you're doing at the Coca-Cola company in that regard to understand that consumer value proposition, meet them with newer types of packaging formats or things that feel like they're more genuine to that context?
Yes, I think Coca-Cola, like a lot of big FMCGs, is pivoting to digital, pivoting to the growth sectors, if you will. And really doubling down on data and insight, so you really understand that consumer, that user journey end to end in a far better way, more assets into basically data capture, really important. And then, ultimately thinking about brands a bit differently. I think all the big FMCGs are, it used to be, I perhaps if I was at P&G, there was a brand template for how you build a brand, like Tide, let's say. And maybe you took that same template over to a very smaller brand and you thought that template would work. I think that is, that's not what's happening today. Most of these big FMCGs, they're looking at brands at least in 3 ways: challenger, explorers, and leaders. And how you grow them, the algorithm is completely different. and you're codifying how to grow those three types of brands. And there's some real patience, if you will, around some of these smaller brands at some of these bigger FMCGs. And if you're a retailer, what's interesting just around these micro brands, in many cases, they're preferred just because they're different and they have such a big digital audience. And they can provide differentiation to your digital or retail shelf. So it's a fascinating, complex, ever fast change, probably the fastest change ever in the history of commerce happening now. And I think more and more, commerce and marketing are just blending. I mean, I don't think of them so different anymore. It used to be sales was over here, marketing's back over here. Today, they're absolutely never been more connected. And so I think that's actually, a really good thing.
Oh, I agree. It's, some people used to think of it as a little bit of a collision. And I think now, to your point, it's like the lines are blurring, and the ways that we think about what used to be sort of distinct activity is definitely blending, which is, awesome to see. And I think is part of what's creating the creative potential in the space as well. I was just judging the D and AD awards for the commerce category, and it was incredible to see the submissions. And again, a lot of that was COVID forcing creatives into thinking about the pain points along the consumer journey differently and solving with very interesting commerce activity. So I think it really is changing in the marketing mix and across media, especially as retailers become media spaces, the way we think about commerce. Your business is also tightly linked to the restaurant business, especially when you think about kind of out of home demand for your brands, and ways that people start to sometimes even learn about newer brands that you may have, or like what you've done with Freestyle is a great example of putting the consumer a bit more in control and allowing them to sort of drive taste combinations. I'd love to talk a little bit about that business. I know for our commerce conference, we had Kurt Kane from Wendy's, and I know you related to that conversation he had with John Cook. But this has also been a massive disruption in terms of thinking about out-of-home dining and the fast casuals. Tell me a little bit about how you're evolving your partnerships and the ways you're looking at those relationships in that business.
Sure. That's really where I'm spending most of my time now is with our larger restaurant and QSR chains. And we definitely see a new restaurant economic model that's sort of, evolving post-COVID-19, because as we all know, COVID-19 just sped up exponentially all these emerging trends. So restaurants obviously leaned in a very big way and improved their digital maturation, in a matter of months, which might have taken years. So, there's sort of 6 parts to that story very quickly. We definitely think that the on-premise operation changes significantly going forward. In many, many cases, a restaurant or QSR could be considered just a distribution node. In other words, maybe 70% of my business used to be, in the restaurant, 60%. Today, it may be 80% is not restaurant. And maybe that's the way it stays, or certainly trends that way. So these parking lots are becoming really mobile transaction centers. And there's a lot underneath that. And if you come into the restaurant, maybe it's going to be for the experience, but I'm going to have a draw for you, something like maybe a community hub. And Chick-fil-A and some other brands are doing some interesting work here. So the community can come here at a designated place, etc. So I'm going to radically change the format also because of hygiene and sanitation. Big new lens there. So, and we're seeing most of the big QSR chains develop and sort of remodel the physical structure to what we're talking about. Secondly, many of the more restaurants are going to go direct to consumer. I don't mean they're going to ship them, something, but they're going to find ways to directly connect with you to drive more affinity, loyalty, data capture, on and on and on, just like the big FMCG brands are. We're already seeing this. There's plenty of use cases. The third is really the use of dark kitchens, which could be a $1 trillion business by 2030, the growth of delivery. We also think as a part of that, automation picks up significantly with vending. So I'm going to have this very high-end, high-tech, high-quality food-producing machine, and I'm going to place that where humans go. I'm not necessarily going to have a human there, but I'm going to have this sophisticated capital. And we definitely see much more of automated commerce happening in that manner. And then just the last three elements would be a more conscious effort against consumers that are challenged economically. And so that might be with subscription models, that might be with loyalty models that reward that type of behavior. But there's definitely some consumers that are in a different place economically coming out of COVID, and I'm going to reach them in different ways. Fifthly, would just be technology. We see lots of AI coming to the restaurant business, and so you think about what McDonald's has done with dynamic yield. Yum has done some really interesting work with AI and automation. RBI going down the same path, and you're going to see personalized selling really take off even more with all of this, and really more automation in the back of the house because the quality could be better. And as labor rates continue to grow across the world, especially in markets, as a franchisee, you kind of like the economics of robotics in the back of the house in many cases, once you get past the capital pain, if you will. And then lastly is just a move to get my brand to the home. Look, the fastest growing channel in the world is the home. How do I get better connected to the home? And so if I'm going through the drive-thru, if I'm pulling up in the parking lot, I'm getting lunch, how can I also sell you a prepared meal, much like you would get at a grocery store? And so that's sort of this context. I would say also retailers have never pivoted faster and more aggressively for the meals business because of COVID-19. And so the battle for meals between restaurants and retailers has never been, I think, more competitive or more cooperative, because in many cases, they're partnering together to grow their brand and sales. And we're seeing phenomenal collaboration use cases with restaurants and retailers. So never dull currently.
I've really been fascinated to see some of what different restaurants have done. I love those meal kits, where you can just pull up and they give you a recipe and a box of the ingredients, and they have all this extra supply in some cases. So I thought that was incredibly creative. I do think, to your point, like there was, again, who would have thought that you would order a McDonald's to be delivered to your home, or some of the other fast restaurants? You would just not think about having that ever delivered. It was, again, one of those things that you need that inflection point or that, massive shift to take place to give you the use case of when you say, I'm on Zoom calls, or I'm working, flat out straight, and I don't have time to get to a drive-through, and that's what you want. So the, added, additional convenience of having a Starbucks delivered to your front door makes a lot of sense. So tell me a little bit, that was a lot of the what, which was amazing to learn about, but I'd love to get into, if you wouldn't mind, a bit of the how. So how has your relationship evolved? How are you joining the restaurants that you work with in this type of a conversation? How are you kind of co-investing in innovation? And are they shaping and helping you think about your business? Are you sharing data on the consumer and this new connected consumer? Tell us a little bit more about how this is working.
Sure, Beth Ann, I think you hit on a lot of it. So we're trying to be a good partner, and as COVID was obviously taking place, we were leaning in on delivery, working very closely with small chains as well as the larger chains on how do we help you pivot the menu to delivery and digital. And so, that could be the form factor. So maybe it's less of fountain drinks, it's more of a packaged drink, obviously. Maybe it was also a real increase in the quality of, call it, the digital menu. And so, my hero imagery is built out for mobile, so I can really understand what the beverage choices are on mobile. I can have more dynamic, high quality content in general on the menu, because more and more the menus really are coming on your phone. So how can I make that experience better? Certainly, I think helping drive beverage incidents and sales with our food service aggregator partners all over the world. So it's really, like always, sort of the and story, working with the customers, obviously big and small, trying to create value for all of them in this new digital context, especially with what we talked about with restaurants and with the key last mile providers. All of the delivery aggregators across the world, which have seen obviously unprecedented demand for their business. And so those are just a few ways. And certainly coming out of COVID, we're excited that consumers, I think, are ready to go back into restaurants a bit more. But certainly many of the rituals that have been developed. That's a key term. The rituals that have been developed over the last year and a half, if you will, certainly last year. Well, there'll be stickiness there. We definitely think that when we look at all the research, there's going to be a high stickiness factor to mobile orders, to delivery, to this parking lot of not going maybe in the restaurant, but click and collect. And certainly, if you look at the retail side, we've made the same pivot, towards e-commerce, towards the digital shelf, and figuring out ways to help retailers drive click and collect. From a retail perspective, you could see the China model kind of playing out all across the world, whereby in many stores, maybe 30% of the revenue is driven by click and collect and e-commerce. And the store, once again, like the restaurant, becomes a distribution node first and foremost. So when I remodel the store, I'm going to be thinking about it like that. And to have consumers and people and humans sort of go into the store or restaurant, I'm definitely going to be looking to drive the experience factor. I mean, you and I, when we were in our 20s, we probably went, to Macy's or somewhere, or Sears on an escalator. That's not happening anymore, right? So it's a little different, I think. And so truly understanding the Gen Z consumer is going to be important. And then also, kind of maybe moving a bit away from consumer insights to human insight. I think Coca-Cola and all the FMCG brands, restaurants, retailers are definitely doing that. I want to understand the human behavior in an aggregate, wide lens, so I truly understand the context better and the journey and where I fit best, versus I'm just going to look at this consumer. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. And, I know we also are both fans of Scott Galloway. I think he may have made a quote similar to that, where he said, there's no shopping in the future that requires an escalator, However, I have to say, especially given that one of our offices at 3 Columbus Circle in New York is right across from the new Nordstrom, it takes a really great development and architecting and designing for the new consumer. And you can see people are already coming back in there, especially a younger generation who craves physical experiences. They crave, like you said before, community and a place that sort of is a magnet for drawing them in, that gives them a reason for being there, where there's demos and bands and boutiques and food and all those things that make it worthwhile to come out in the physical world. Will it happen the way we used to shop, or will it happen around seasonalities the way it used to be? Definitely not. But on that same thematic, I would love to hear you talk slightly about one, there's a connected consumer. So we know that they've got a mobile device in their hands, and it's not just physical or digital. To your point, it's online to offline and back again. But how are you all thinking about experiential and still an element of activation that has a physical component to it?
Well, I still think that's really important, but it's probably a lot different, right? How we think about experiential marketing. I think more of the experience happens on digital, quite frankly. I mean, in the past, I think if you said experiential marketing, Beth Ann, maybe I'm wrong, but I think many people would say, well, that's a physical execution. We're going to have the agency. Still going to do some of that, but it's going to be there's going to be a wider lens on it, because really, for many to most brands, the first touch point ever is mobile. It's not something physical, it's mobile. So the experience needs to be obviously pretty amazing there, and then end to end. So I think there's definitely a focus on that from everyone that I'm talking to, and certainly the use cases. And to bring that together, I think you have sort of two factions of marketing. You have the traditional brand marketers that have a lens on experiential, right? These were folks that went to MBA schools maybe 10 years ago, and that's really important. However, and I'm going to have maybe others that understand performance marketing and maybe grew up in marketing from a digital perspective only, and certainly have a different lens. You really want to have both of those groups working together to drive the overall experiential and, frankly, brand strategy. And I think that's what a lot of companies struggle with, because the culture can be different. These, personas are a little bit different, if you will. You really want both working together.
Yeah, we do a lot with blended teams, to your point, so that you can bring together people who really have exposures and experiences, building both types of experiences and then bringing them together to think about it in new ways. We had massive pivot last year where we created this notion of live digital experiences, and another notion that goes along with it around no dead ends. So there was, literally any way you came into the experience, you were allowed to be able to move through it, to buy product, to learn more, to become part of a customer relationship management set, and really part of a community. So it really made us think through, again, in a very both practical but ambitious way, what the future of experiential was going to look like. So we have a bunch of questions coming up, and I want to just offer to the audience, if you have any other questions for Barry, please put them in the Q&A. Are you okay with me putting you in the spot with a few of these questions that are going to be new for you from the audience? Great. Okay. So the first one is, can you define e-commerce and digital commerce for your company? How are you all defining that?
Well, there's lots of ways to define e-commerce. I think we're looking at it like many others. There's, direct to consumer. And so I think we're going to see more activity a bit there across FMC in general. There's business to business, and we're going to see more of that. And so electronically, there's a lot of benefits going to business. And then a myriad of ways to go business to consumer. So think, Walmart.com, et cetera. Those are just sort of three vectors. There's others that are evolving that we've talked about today. I think one that I think is going to come to Europe and certainly the Americas fast is live streaming. So we're going to see more commerce happening live streaming. We're going to see the store and the restaurant used as a content engine. And if you're an entrepreneur, you're already doing this. This is what's so interesting. So if you're an entrepreneur, you already know how to do this. If you're at a bigger enterprise, you're probably learning how to do this, and there's going to be a lot of value in it. But I think e-commerce continues to evolve and expand in its form factor exponentially going forward. And a lot of the clues, as we've said before, are in China.
I like what you're saying about live streaming, because if you think about it, and we both come from obviously a customer sales trade background, where you think about a traditional sales force, now basically it's beyond influencers. It becomes every single person. It's an infinite potential of a sales force, which is amazing. When you have people who are streaming the ability, and you can create a buy now right in that moment, it just creates so many opportunities and potential in the future. What do you see as the biggest challenge that you're facing for the future? Is there something that is really, kind of an obstacle or a challenge to the progress?
I think for any enterprise, especially a legacy enterprise, the challenge is, twofold. It's moving your capital and pivoting your people, because so much of your capital is hard to move. It's in things like plants and stores and distribution networks. So, really understanding what's the best way for me to kind of move or adjust my capital to take advantage of the next S curve, and, sort of reskill my people. And, there are many folks that would tell us today, 30% of all current jobs are either going to go away, they're going to change, or they're going to be completely new jobs as we think about working with machines and things. And so the leadership challenge is really, looking ahead for your industry, thinking about what do I need to do to make that pivot? Where is the S? And subsequently, I have to probably go through a dual transformation, which most enterprises are going down.
So have you been markedly adjusting your transformation strategies based on what happened last year, differently than you had already set for the next, say, 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I think Coca-Cola, this is all public. We definitely have an emerging stronger strategy, and much of that was shared recently by the organization at CAGNY, and we're operating completely different than before COVID. And just on a personal note, if I can, Beth Ann, because I think it's a good learning. So, I did start a medical spa about 3 years ago that I spend the weekends on. And, we're operating completely different today than we were before COVID. If you asked me as an entrepreneur of my own brand, how to drive UGC 5-star reviews, it's marketably different today than it was a year and a half ago. Form factor, value, and the service itself, and the way we, it's really different. It's completely different. And if you ask me about live streaming, we're doing it. Now, we're not rushing it, but we just leaned in and did it. We didn't have to go through legal and maybe some other things like a big corporation. We just went ahead and did it. And so, our spa, we may have 7 people in the spa on a Friday at 2:00, but maybe we're broadcasting to 1,900. And probably, maybe 1 to 4% of those humans will come into the spa. So Beth Ann, this idea of being an entrepreneur, hands on the keyboard, being an entrepreneur has so much benefit to large scale enterprises that are trying to be more entrepreneurial. Now, I want to continue to berate that point, but I think it's really important.
Very important. Yeah, I've always loved the notion of entrepreneurialism as well, which is that idea that even in a big enterprise-wide company, you can still draw from and codify those entrepreneurial mindsets and behaviors and disciplines and ways of operating. So it sounds like you're doing that. What an incredible way to have like this side hustle. Sounds like, I think it's primarily for your wife, and so you get to bring your kind of marketing prowess and understanding from your real job into that, but also take a little bit of that energy and learning that you're getting and apply it to what you do day to day. So do you find yourself either, or maybe it's an and versus an either, do you find yourself drawing from some of those learnings and applying it immediately into work? And then are you also trying to inspire your colleagues to find a way to get kind of that side hustle on that they can learn from?
Absolutely goes both ways. And, I think the best way to learn about entrepreneurship is just jump in and do it. And, so many of my friends have side hustles where they're doing this. And some are, it's more for the learning maybe. And others it's for the learning. And like there's a real business, like there's, $10,000 in revenue a week being created. And so I definitely see, more of that, at least in sort of my network. And I think with Gen Z, and if you look at the career path of a Gen Z human over the next 30 years, they're going to be doing so much gig work. They're not going to be working, for the most part, I don't believe, for large corporations for 20 and 30 years. They're going to be doing much more agile gig work. It's going to be a completely different career track. They're probably going to change careers 5 or 6 times. This is what much of the research would tell you about Gen Z. What does that all add up to? I'm not exactly sure, but if you're able to be an entrepreneur, it's going to be better.
Yeah, agree. So talk to me a little bit about that sort of future generation. Obviously, it's critically important to the success of your business. What are the things that you're doing to, imbue them into the brands, into the products, to learn about them, to continue to push the way that you're communicating so it feels relevant? Are there insights that you're gaining along the way? And what are some of the, the tools or the tricks of the trade to really understand and know them?
Just my own personal point of view, kind of being close to the topic, working with so many customers and wonderful partners, is transparency. This Gen Z, they're expecting transparency. And the way you build trust is not about talking about things, it's doing things. Kind of a big point, a little different than the prior generations. I also think that there's certainly, they value reviews, but not blindly. So, user-generated content continues to be important, but with some level of a filter there, but still very important. Community, the more you can connect your brand to the local community is so important. What is this brand doing to specifically help community? Really important. I also think purpose, we talked about earlier, is way at the top. It's, it's not just a slogan, it's what you live and do. And then as we talked about earlier, ESG, I just think that's really important. How is your brand good or bad for the planet, big picture? How is it driving value in my community? I really want to understand that. It really matters. And so it's, it's a little more complex, I think, today to build a brand story and live it. For Gen Z, the standard is a little higher, if you will. And of course, everything is digital first for this group. It's amazing what you show them, cassette recorder, et cetera, et cetera. They've never seen that. So it's just kind of funny. I'm raising a couple of these Gen Z consumers now. So that does help as well.
You have your built-in focus group there at home. That is always helpful if you can go find those true Gen Zers in your life. But what's interesting, I think, I used to do a lot in the area of segmentation, that it's, less sometimes generational things that are the dividing line now. That is, we're not building segmentations necessarily just around age. We're building it around mindsets and, to your point, behaviors and these bigger themes of the planet, consumerism, more human factors that are what ultimately unites people. So I like what you're saying and what you're hitting upon there, because you're not necessarily alienating an audience that has loved you for years and been loyal to many of your brands and to your company, at the same time that you're continually bringing in a bigger, broader, newer audience. There's nothing that would kind of make you feel less relevant to me, because we share still a lot of those same mindsets. Is that something that you're specifically thinking about in your communications? Those kinds of connectivity around those those ideas and attributes and value systems versus just a generational age difference.
Totally. Mm-hmm. No, it is. There's no question about it. And though you have to do that, through a segmented lens around, affordability. And so I think these days when you talk about marketing and branding, you got to be using the term affordability, because there's just a segment of the population post-COVID that's more important than ever. It doesn't mean we necessarily have to drop the price point, but there's different ways and packages and form factors that can reach all consumers. And I think most brands, and certainly Coca-Cola, are very in tune with Gen Z and are, positioning brands that are attractive to them. And all the attributes we've been talking about clearly come into play on sort of that brand vision architecture that you have, for essentially the brand plan.
Well, this has been incredible. You are a superstar in our space for sure. I'm sure you're also one of the more popular guys in your company right now. As soon as things started to shift in commerce, people were probably gravitating towards you for the answers and helping think through the new strategies. I'm sure it's been a very demanding time as well.
Well, thank you, Beth Ann. When we just want to be a great partner for our customers and partners in general, and enjoy WPP and what you guys do, because you're a key partner to bring value to our entire ecosystem, and always value the time with you guys.
I appreciate that. And I really have always appreciated that client agency bond and relationship when you are, connected in that way and you recognize that you're both better together, is something else that Raja talks about in quantum marketing. So I do appreciate that you withhold that as well. For those of you that are wanting more of Barry's time and thinking, you can follow him on LinkedIn at Barry Thomas. I know he would appreciate getting notes from you and continuing to get inspired and provoked. If you have other questions that have gone unanswered from here, he's someone who's great to follow, and he mentions he's an avid follower as well. So the two of us have many people in common that we look to for advice in this space and guidance, and things are changing so quickly. So it really does help to have other resources and expertise out there. And this afternoon, we've got a whole packed agenda on that too. So Lauren, thank you for kicking us off this morning or this afternoon, and Barry for being our first up, and over to you to keep us going.
Thanks, Beth Ann, and thanks, Barry. It's great to have another Atlantan on the stage.
For sure. Thank you. Thank you, Beth Ann. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, guys. All right, it was an amazing chat to start off the day of thought leadership. So we're going to keep the ball rolling here. And really excited to bring up to the stage our next set of discussions. It's going to be with our good friend, Delu Jackson, the Vice President of Precision Marketing at Conagra Brands. And Delu is going to be joined by Walter Gear, the Executive Creative Director of Experience Design at VMOY&R. So please help me welcome Walter. Hey, Walter.
Hey, what's going on? How's everybody making out?
Yeah, welcome to the virtual stage.
All right, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Walter, where are you located?
I am actually on an island off the coast of New York. Long Island.
I love that.
Yeah.
Be in Long Island. Okay, great. Yeah, we're hoping to get back up to New York really soon.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, And can I just tell you, it's been a while since I've been on a brand innovator stage. I think the last time was like South by like 4 years ago. Why did we wait so long?
Oh my goodness. We need to hear the story. And because so basically you guys are both alumni of the brand innovators community here. Got Delu. It's been a minute. Delu, how are you?
Doing well. How are you today?
Yeah, very good. Thanks to both of you for taking the time out of your day to be here. And I know, you took the time to prep and plan for this. So we really appreciate it.
You got it.
Wait, prep?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just our jobs. Prep by
Love
doing our
this.
jobs every day. So yeah.
Well, you guys have fun, and we'll be back towards the end when you guys are wrapping things up. And I'm looking forward to hearing the conversation.
Okay.
Okay, you might have to cut us off because I'm telling you, this could be, we could just keep going about this all day long. But look, Delu, man, I'm happy to see you here. I'm happy to see your face again.
So good to see you as always.
Indeed. So let's dig in, man. I think we have a lot to talk about here. Gosh, where do we even begin? Let's start with this, man. I think because this is an important one. Clearly, we have been in a crazy moment this past year, right? And before we get into the whole like diversity talk, let's talk business for a second. Like, how has your commerce strategy really evolved over the last 3 years, right? More importantly, due to this last year, that pivot that I'm sure like many of us have made that you may or may have not made. Like curious to kind of just start there. Or even before that, I apologize. Let's just go and understand what are some of and I apologize for this pivot. Let's just go through a little bit about you first, right? Like who you are, and then of course your brands that you guys represent.
Sure. So thanks as always. Great to be here. And so I lead the marketing team at Conagra Brands, and my team includes our brand design and packaging, e-commerce, media, content, so CRM, and then working a lot on this whole digital transformation. I've been here about 4 years. And for that entire time, as you just described, we've sort of been in this, like many companies, transformation mode. We kind of knew this thing was coming, right? We were seeing our business shift because the consumers were shifting the way they were thinking about food, acquiring food, and even acquiring information and content as related to food. So we were on a journey over the last, again, 4 years. It just got accelerated by 5 to 10 years, depending on who you talk to in the past year. The good news is we were ready for it. We were as prepared as we would like to say we could be, given the things that we didn't know that were going to happen. But I'm proud to say that our team was positioning ourselves based on what we saw emerging, and have been able to respond to it accordingly.
So let me ask then, like, what has the last year looked like for you all, right? In terms of the business, right? Like, where did you see pivots that were made? Because I feel like there's a lot, look, everyone likes to talk about the fact that they do digital, right? Truth is, now everyone was really forced to put that at the forefront of how they do business, how they communicate with their consumers, how they get people like, to purchase and do things. So curious to know a little bit more about what you guys did throughout this year that might've been different and or unique.
Yeah, I'd say, first of all, going into this year, we were already truly digital. Our investments in our brands were already 70+% digital, even before this year. And that started, again, back nearly 4 years ago with the recognition that in a world gone digital, it's how the consumers were behaving. And so we saw an opportunity, even before this all hit, to really meet our consumers where they were. The second thing that I think was a big recognition is that there's been this convergence of retail and media and the way people consume information, right? And streaming and all these other things. So the entire funnel, we called it, of how consumers were engaged by brands and businesses has been it's not even linear anymore. It's just been disrupted. And so we were already leaning into that. So I like to say, if there's a thing called being digital, we were already there, and it's only accelerated more, or in better sense, has allowed us to be prepared for this sort of phenomenon. And so there's some specific things that when people say being digital, you think about, again, back to the consumer. It's not so much the way we think about it internally. It's about how the consumer is, again, doing all those things. We saw something very specific in food when we talk about digital, which is how they shop, how they made those decisions, and how they were acquiring the food through e-commerce just really took off. And I think it got people just to be more laser focused on that concept of digital as a total ecosystem versus that single moment in time or media or advertising. Makes sense.
Yeah, that it's interesting too, because I mean, when we think about food and these products and what we've done over the past years, like I've never shopped so much in my life for food products, more importantly, online. Right. And then of course, for many of us, like I know that the beauty of this past year, at least for me, is the fact that now I never have to walk into a store again. Right. So I'm buying the products, I go and pull up in the parking lot, then I get that. But how you have targeted your consumers though, has that changed though? Because I know prior to the pandemic, like everyone was on this huge kick of like location-based advertising, right? And clearly, because 1.0 was like, hey, I'm walking down the street, I'm walking past this store, maybe I'll deliver them an ad for a Slim Jim to hope they walk in and buy it. Reality speaking, though, that wasn't the best way of targeting, but 2.0 was then understanding foot traffic, where they go, and then being able to determine where they're going to go next. We're all at home or a gas station or a food market. How did that change how you guys were then targeting your consumers?
Yeah, I think the reality is the consumers have been giving us those signals, and now they're more specific, right? They're searching for specific category items or attributes or needs, right? And I think what we just have is more opportunity to think differently about how we respond to them. Let me give you an example. So you see people, we used to say they would shop for brands, right? I'm looking for this brand that incorporates all these specific attributes and these things. But now you see people shopping based on fitness behavior or diet behaviors, or I want these attributes. I want low sugar, or I want high protein or low carbs. It actually unlocks the potential of the entire portfolio that can meet those requirements. It's not a single brand anymore, but several. So we were just today looking at, more people eating at home, more people watching TV and video at home. So we sell popcorn, right? Over Redenbacher's and Angie's Boom Chicka Pop and Act Two. So we have all these great brands that are available. And now we don't have to go to market with a single brand, but we can go to market in a category and look at whether someone's looking for a specific size, a specific form, kernels that I can make at home, or microwave popcorn. We can now take a more portfolio approach to helping consumers in those categories. And that's how we've really pivoted.
That's so interesting too. So this is like a more of a lifestyle approach. So have your categories changed, or do you find yourself right now like building together more products as like, okay, this is one group, this is another?
Yeah, the category definition, we do something we call demand units, right? So we literally look at those category demand signals, and then we think which brand or brands or products within those brand platforms would be most useful for those consumers. And those are the ones that we would promote or make sure that they show up, whether it's in search or social or any forum. It allows us to promote the products that the consumers have demonstrated they're most likely to choose.
That's interesting. So let me ask you here. It's an interesting question. What do you think is the biggest threat to your commerce business right now?
Biggest threat. I would think it's our continued ability to meet that accelerated demand and the shift, right? So you mentioned you don't have to go to the store anymore. But I think the consumers, I love it, they have the choice to go or not. And it's us keeping pace with how they choose to engage with us and making sure we have the right form, the right format, the right size, the right price, all those things for a growing set of consumers who are accessing the space, but also a very diffuse and diverse group of consumers who don't all have the same means and capabilities in that space. We're going to have to make sure that we can service them all as those dynamics shift.
Interesting. So look, I understand clearly that your commerce marketing is demand based, right? So for the folks that are actually listening, would love you to just explain a little bit about how that actually works in your world.
Yeah, I think the key is, again, that when we talk about demand and consumers, and I think one of the most interesting things there is that we're all working with a finite set of consumers, right? There's, I think the last census said 330 million people in the US, and that's about 30 million households that make up that universe. And since we're all competing with those groups, if we were to go with every individual brand identifying the size of audience and the potential consumers, it'd be very large, right? It'd probably exceed that population. Yeah. But if we look at it from a total demand, right, the demand for a given category or a certain set of behaviors, and then think about all of our brands and products that can support that demand, we actually are starting to build our own baskets. And so that's a really different approach than saying every single brand has an infinite number of consumers that we should market to, right? So that means we would spend a lot to try to get access to what will actually inevitably be a fixed number of consumers who are actually going to participate. And so, so again, I gave the example of 3 popcorns in the same category. Each one has an opportunity to win individually, but collectively we have an exponential impact. So we think of that as a demand category. Maybe it's salty snacks, maybe it's popcorn as a subcategory in salty snacks, rather than thinking of it as a specific category for a brand that has only 1 or 2 attributes.
That's really interesting. Yeah, makes sense. So here's a question then. What, in doing so, right, what are some of the tools or even technologies that you guys are actually using to deploy to essentially help with some of your commerce evolution, I'll say?
I'd say the biggest technology are the people.
Hey.
And I think the biggest thing we had to do is adjust our practices with how our people interact with that category and demand. And it's really specific around how we've organized. We organize instead of around, again, as individual brands, we've organized around those demand spaces, which allows our teams to have cross-brand and cross-product, cross-platform intimacy with the consumers as they work in that space. So that's one. So as we established those practices, we were able to leverage technology and tools, whether it's retail data platforms or other data platforms, social platforms, or again, consumer insight platforms that would allow us to see or identify that demand at scale. Again, not platform specific in every case, sometimes it was. But then our teams had to leverage those technologies to support that practice. Does it make sense?
Yep, so, absolutely.
And again, it's sort of very purposeful. We also have, audience-based platforms and identifiers that we do versus our internal, that are built on our internal systems, as well as connecting those to the external platforms. But very consumer focused and really being behavioral so we can respond to what they're looking for, not a pre-planned sort of segmentation or view that's based on historical behavior.
Gotcha. David, I'm going to put you on the spot for a second, man.
Yeah.
What would you say in this past year, what would you say was the work that you feel the proudest of that you guys basically brought out to market with?
Yeah. I'd say it's the work that we've done with Slim Jim.
I love Slim Jims, by the way, man.
Okay.
I think I'm running low on my supply here. I need to get a hookup on these.
Okay, we'll talk about that. So I think that's a great example of a brand that had historically been one of our big broadcast spenders, had an emerging digital presence, but was never fully encapsulated this idea of sort of audience building, community building, and really understanding and leaning into the cultural currency of that brand. So if you look, we grew our Instagram, followers in a couple of years from a few thousand to over 1 million, right? And it was all just built on watching how the community engages, how they love the brand and what they love about the brand. And it wasn't always about the product. It was about how it fit into their lifestyle and their culture. And then you may have seen recently, we did something with, we won the Ad Week Adness, March Adness around that community and culture. It's the community and the stickiness of that community that has really helped propel that brand into another level. And we didn't use traditional, what some people would call traditional marketing methodology. We had a big presence in digital, we had a big presence online and in social, and so I think that it's really great to see those brands emerge, not as single case studies, but as long-term success stories of building something that's lasting. And we continue to build on that. You'll see more and more coming on how that community and how that brand continues to accelerate. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't really focus on the fact that we were also doing lots of great innovation around the product. And so as we're innovating and engaging with that audience and bringing those things together, and with our commerce, it starts to demonstrate, what we're here to talk about is, what does the future of commerce look like? Where social commerce and all of those things start to converge. Those are going to be capabilities and ways of working that most organizations are going to want to think about.
Well, I'd love to sit on something you just said a minute ago. You talked about the growth in your Instagram. You went from few thousand to like million plus. I think that a lot of people look at today in terms of how they engage with consumers and get a little confused with where they should be, right? And so you hit on like community, and community is really big, right? Like when you have community and individuals talking about a particular thing and or product, right? Social validation, right? Kicks in. Right. It's like if I share something, someone else will go and get it, et cetera. Have you all found, and this is with any one of your products, have you all found success in a specific platform, whether it be TikTok, whether it be Instagram, Twitter, so on and so forth, Clubhouse? Like, has there been like a go-to? Just curious.
I think it's varied. I mean, the big ones have demonstrated the ability to deliver audiences at scale. No, sorry, let me take it back. Communities at scale.
Yep.
Because it's where the people are operating. So I think, and we've always done something, like everyone else, we do a cultural currency mapping. We try to figure out which of these brands actually have a conversation that's in place. And so then we decide, right? Some brands try to create their own conversations. That's often difficult. You can join them, or you can kind of, put your branding or your presence into those conversations and start to create certain narratives. And I think we found that wherever we can probably joining those conversations and leaning into what the community is already talking about, we've been most successful there. You'll see them emerging on other brands like Duncan Hines. Baking's a big deal. We launched some products called Epic, which is how people, like to make these gooey, specialty, great desserts. You start to see that audience and community growing, because we're leaning into a behavior that's already happening and that people are really, as I said, we were meeting before, everyone loves cake, right? So if you lean into that and think about all the different ways people are leveraging something that is familiar and fun and exciting, if you do that well, the audience will engage with you, right? Authentic engagement with a product that does a job that people can relate to. So, and that's not platform specific, but we are specific about which platforms we find that behavior most compelling.
That's actually really great that you said that, because relevancy is key. Sometimes it's about joining in the conversation, not necessarily trying to spark an entirely new one. So that's a great bit of information there. So when we talk about this year that we've been into and thrusted into, right, and this pivot in terms of digital, you mentioned 3 or 4 times authenticity came up when you were speaking. And now we're a subtle pivot here, or we'll call it a subtle pivot at least. Authenticity really matters now with brands, right? So we came to a point where, Ahmaud was murdered. A lot of brands, a lot of companies stood up and they posted a black square in their Instagram account. They, said they're going to donate a lot of money. They said they're going to, all this transformative kind of stuff evolving around diversity and inclusion. What did that moment look like for your brand, right? And I mean, clearly a gigantic commerce brand, right? So what does that look like for your organization and what you guys try to do to navigate through those times, and even currently to this moment we're in now?
Yeah, clearly, from a company like everyone else, those events had a profound impact on the organization, and every individual, top to bottom. We had a lot of discussions about things we could do. and obviously we have 100 brands and 8,000 products, many that service affected communities, and so we've worked in a lot of ways to think about how we could have impact there. But I would say that what we found, number one, is we worked with partners like you guys and your leadership team to think about what we could do together to have an impact. And as you know, there's going to be more happening there.
Absolutely.
But I think where we had the most impact was we realized that the individuals in our organization could have impact in communities. So while our brands got active and we try to make sure that our brands are, communicating appropriately, that we had contextually relevant content, any content that we have that was insensitive, whether it was pointed out or not, we were much more conscious of that.
Yep.
We included partners that had more view into diverse communities that we may not have had inside the organization to make sure the content we produced was relevant and credible. We added more diversity into our user-generated content and social activities and chefs and culinary teams and cuisine, so we can make sure that was more visible. Even like brands like Gardein, where we did work with more diverse chefs to make sure that was representative. And then the thing I've been most proud of is our team worked with programs like Social Works and After School Matters, where we actually had teams doing, and we have an ongoing internship right now with future high school graduates, where we're talking to them about careers in companies like ours. And we had them work on projects, something that went live in commerce. We made a baking kit for the holidays that was designed by graduates from that program, and we paid them.
Nice.
We didn't ask them to do it as an internship and a feel good to say they got experience. We actually paid them market value for their designs. Good. And that's really important because we talk a lot about that, right? We do internships, we do scholarships, we do programs, but you and I have talked a lot about this. It's about creating sustainable career paths and financial equity. And that's where I think companies are going to have a lot of impact. And I'm proud to say that my team has been doing that and doing it individually because each of us can have impacts that will and leverage our company's tremendous resources. And they've been very supportive in this, in helping us create a more sustainable through line. Does that make sense? So
absolutely. And you yeah, it's super. It is. It's very important. And one thing you hit on too is it paid, right? Because of this, right now, a lot of help is coming, but people are saying, well, you can do it for free, right? And a lot of times, like we or people of color can't afford to go to these internships and work for free, can't afford to go travel across the country and get a room or something. Like it's just, it's impossible. It's difficult. So I applaud you guys for doing that work. So here's another question then, along the same lines. So clearly you guys are doing a lot of work. Clearly you're investing a lot in the community and whatnot, but what should other brands be focusing on right now to actually get it right? Because I think that when we talk about doing the work and being authentic, there is this fear of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing. And then if there's a fear of not saying the wrong thing or not showing up, then it essentially is, again, you don't show up. And then it looks like, well, you're not saying anything because you don't care. So for any individuals that are watching, whether it be executive leaderships or not, like how do we allow for them to understand the importance of speaking up and showing support in a positive manner?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I just add representative folks to help answer the question or be part of the narrative in the debate. I still find a lot of organizations are trying to guess, or they'll ask one person or two people for an opinion, but then fail to include those broader groups in the ongoing conversations and the evolving discussions about what to say, where to say it, or what to do. And I think that comes back to representation, right? So that's important. I know you've done a lot of work on getting more people into the room and a seat at the table. That table has to be permanent, not transactional. Hey, I have a problem right now, so I'm going to bring someone in just to answer this question. That has to become an embedded part of how we operate every day, because it's not a one-time thing, it's an all-the-time thing. So that's super important. And I think that's the most tactical short-term advice I could give to anyone. And a longer term, I think I've found that there's a lot of ambition and a lot of energy inside organizations. And I think every step's a positive step if we can make progress. And I think all of us are lacking an operating system to allow us to connect to a universe that many people don't understand, or they do things, right? Everyone's launching a program here, a college scholarship, a connection with this HBCU and with that one. But it's not what we do on a daily basis, right? We're a food manufacturer that makes good food that's healthy for people, and we're good marketers and digital people and those things. I think there's this realization that we have to figure out how we use what we're good at to make impacts in those communities. And I'm not sure there's an operating system just yet to connect those dots. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So we're all running around doing things that we're excited about, or we read about and we heard about, but it's not things that we're as professional and proficient at. And I think there's so many things we do really well that could have impacts. If we were to focus it there, I think we could have outsized impact in a much shorter time frame.
So you and I, we had a conversation recently, and I know that you had talked about that impact, right? And what that impact looks like in the community. And then, the conversation pivoted and we were talking about the impact that brands overall have on this world, on each community, and why it's so important for them to actually step up and actually do the right thing right now. We talked about proper ways of eating, right? And it's like, and there's so much we could do to advocate for people by even sharing the right insights and information. I don't want to give too much up here, but could you go deep on that one, man? Because I think that's a really important one.
It comes back to what we do, right? There's so many big food companies that are in every pantry in a lot of these communities that we talk about. And we were talking about the potential of collaboration with some of these community organizations, rather than us trying to go to them individually into those communities. And I called it out DEI each other. What if we were to collaborate and start building platforms that were targeted on these communities? Again, healthy eating, which affects health, which affects financial debt in many of these communities, right? That there's a high cost of poor health and poor eating. Are there ways for us to create better outcomes for those communities with, or food deserts, or all these things? Again, we were talking about all these potential things that would take a collective effort. But there are community organizations working to do these things, but often don't have the funding or the people or the technical knowledge to deliver some of those things. There's just an opportunity for, more organizations to come together and assist with those. So, I think those are types of things, but they're targeted for specific outcomes. It's not just about doing the activity. That one was a group I was talking to, was looking for the root cause of some of the financial inequity, and thinking along that value chain, saying, how could these different expert organizations and companies contribute to that value chain becoming more sustainable and impactful?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's another one then. We also talk about the work, the output of the work, right, that comes out today. And as a organization like yours, I mean, clearly you guys have some brand, your brand is essentially in every individual's home, right? In the US, if not the world, I'd say, right? So with that being said, how you market to your audience really matters, right? And then we're talking on authenticity too, and of course, being in the moment. So how has that looked for your brands, right? Like, what has been the approach you guys have taken to actually ensuring that the message you're bringing out to folks is the right one, and that you're not slipping up and saying and or doing the wrong thing?
Yeah. As I said, our team has made sure that we increase representation in the conversation, and we have honest discussion about those risk factors or impact points.
Yep. And
probably more than ever, people have been more willing to speak up when they see something that could be detrimental or risky. And more and more people have been willing to pivot as a result, right? In some cases, historically, we may have said, that's just a small voice. It's not really an issue. We might see it, but don't worry about it, because the broader implications outweigh that risk.
Yeah.
I think people are taking it more seriously than ever.
Yeah.
And I said, and more importantly, the teams feel more comfortable bringing it at a level that I'd never seen before, right?
Yeah.
They almost feel it's our responsibility to make sure we don't continue to perpetuate these types of negative impacts, right? The detractors that may have been overlooked before, people don't let those, or they try to avoid letting those slip through anymore. And I'm really proud of the whole organization and everyone who's willing to step in and say, it's not a matter if it's my role or if it crossed my desk or not. If I can be of assistance here and have a positive impact, then I'll weigh in.
Absolutely.
And that's really important.
Love that. I'm gonna ask one more on this side, then we're gonna pivot back to the business a bit.
Okay.
So my question would be this then. There are very few people that look like you and I that are in senior leadership positions on the brand side, on the agency side as well. Because of this, we find individuals like you and myself who will often speak out and say the uncomfortable thing at times, right? So what is it that we do, or what is it that we can tell other folks in terms of, the importance of ensuring that there's a diverse set of individuals at the table as key leaders, as decision makers, more importantly, as C-suite executives?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this a lot in that the impact of having diverse voices and perspectives, whether, and I don't like to use the fear of mistake avoidance. It looks at unlocking all of these great ideas and insights and potential through lived experiences, through shared experiences, or by creating a broader set of understanding, right? It's impossible to create that if the representation's not there. It's just impossible. And that the markets and the earning potential for our businesses that we come up with every day that we have representation is exponentially large, right? These communities are accessible, but they do require different contexts at times. We miss opportunities just because we don't know, and we don't have any, even sometimes know to ask the question. So when businesses think about growing and broadening their impact, we're going to need to access these communities in a contextually relevant way. And so I think you're going to have leadership that is brave and leadership that is representative, and representative in the sense that they can help the organizations invest in the right things to access the economic power there. So.
Absolutely. And I would end that with also saying that, like, there is plenty of Black and brown talent out there. I think that brands and companies, we need to be smarter around how we access and find that talent, because I promise you, they live in more places than just the HBCU campuses, right? And then it's also about training up as well, right? It's like the individuals that are in these companies, like, we should figure out like mentorship opportunities. We should figure out opportunities to help train, to ensure that they're able to move on and continue, up that ladder. Because that visibility within the organizations is super critical. It's important when we see other people that look like us at the top, because that shows that there is a path and this is a place that I am welcome in.
Yeah, and I would put this one back on you and maybe share a little bit about what you do in terms of making time. Because it's not just inside of our companies because of the limited numbers you just described. It's that in order to increase inside of our companies, we have to continue to mentor and work with people outside of our companies and build skills and build awareness. I mean, you shared some great stuff with me that you do in terms of just making time,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a few things I'll say, right? One is just mentorship, right? So I mentor, 5+ people a week, random people I do not even know, but who need help. I think it's important. I've been in this space of advertising for 21 years. I didn't have a mentor that looked like me until about 9-10 months ago, right? And that's kind of crazy, right? So it's also for these other individuals that are non-people of color on this call as well, like the importance of allyship, right? Like having someone who sits, I'm fortunate to be where I am, but I also know that I've gotten help from a handful of people, 4 people specifically, bosses of mine who did not look like me, right? But they understood my talent and took me along the way with them. But let's pivot for a hot second too now. I want to pivot back to something that I think would be interesting to hear from you. Through this COVID era, we'll call it, right? What is there anything specifically that you think that you would have done differently now if you were to go back and look at what you learned over the past year? Perhaps something that might have allowed you to ramp up quicker, something that allowed you to generate more dollars, something like, curious to know what that might be.
I, I would say that I was pretty proud of where we are and how we got there. What I probably would have was had more people that were closer to some of these dynamics. Let's say we had a team of 20 who were really well versed in this and super kind of on it because they knew this was important and it was going to be the future. I would have loved to have more people spending more time on it. Right. But it was a matter of size and scale, right? I can look back now and say, wow, if I knew it was going to be 3 or 4 times what it was then, I would have had more people who were much closer to it so that as things continue to change, we could continue to scale. But I feel like we were in pretty good position based on where it was. That would be my only thing. I think the people part's so important. Yeah. And the more people we can engage and have prepared for these emerging dynamics, I think every organization is stronger as a result.
I'm curious, and you don't have to answer this, but like, did you identify, were there any parts of like things where you're like, wow, we totally screwed this up, we shouldn't have done that then? I don't want to put you on the spot here.
Yeah. I think it probably comes down to like everyone else's, there were products that the demand accelerated and we wish we had more of them, and we had to shift some of our favorites, some of our favorite flavors that started to fly off the shelves and off the digital shelf. So if we had more of them, that would have been great. Right. So there are a few of those out there. Again, Slim Jim is one of them. I mean, I wish we had more of them than every day.
Wait, are you saying that are you saying there's a shortage of Slim Jims? This might become a problem now. No, we don't want to go viral here.
As I said, I wish if I'd have known back then that it was going to be as explosive in terms of community engagement and the demand was going to be this high. I'd always wish I had more of those things that people are in super high demand, right?
So, yeah. So look, we're talking about the future of commerce. I'm curious to know, like, when I envision what this space looks like 10 years from now, 15 years from now, I envision a space where clearly we're going to, mobile devices will be gone. Will be some form of wearable, right? Like whether it be a glass or who knows, a contact at some point in time. But I almost look at it as, and I'll start with this white paper I did a while ago, that we found out that basically consumers expect you to know them better than they know themselves. In an era now where like, iOS is updating and lacking like third-party technology or third-party tracking now. What does the future look like in terms of how we engage consumers? Because my thought is that eventually we're going to be getting recommendations for things before we even need to ask for it, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's that. I think one is the consumers have been giving us a lot of those signals for a long time. I just don't know if we've been hearing them. We've been listening. I don't know if we've been hearing them. Yep. So they're going to expect us to answer the question 10 years from now, just like before. Like you said, some of them may expect us to anticipate the answer even before. And I think in certain contexts, that'll be true. Food, I'm sure they're going to expect us to have the right ingredients and the things that make people, have the best outcomes and results. They'll expect that from us, and we'll have to stay on top of that. And then what happens after 3 to 5 years, I don't know, and it probably won't matter, because if I could have thought about what's happening now 3 to 5 years ago, right, how much of this could we have anticipated? The rate and pace of change is so high now. Oh, yeah. I think what we're all going to be accountable for is being responsive, right? Being prepared to pivot and adjust. And we call it be better than yesterday. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to, because the expectations of what that means are going to be exponential each day to the next day. And we're going to have to be ready for that.
Yeah. So here's another one too. When we start to talk about the future of commerce as well, like I would assume that wearables will play a significant role, right? Because now we're talking about health, right? Yeah. So we're able to get so much information now. It's like now you have doctor appointments that are happening like this. There will be a time where we can get treated sitting in our own houses, right? By wearing some of these devices. I'm curious to know, have you guys as a brand thought about what that looks like, or invested any time in what that looks like and how you then communicate the right products by an understanding of their health?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a brand called Healthy Choice. So obviously we're looking at those consumer health trends and diet trends and wellness and avoidance, all of those things are a constant driver of demand.
Yeah.
And so it's important. It's vitally important that we understand the impacts to the consumers of things like that. So
Right.
I know you work in the health space, and
Yep.
I think all food brands are technically in the health space, right? So
Yeah.
super
True.
important. It's something we discuss on a consistent basis as a critical thing. Again, how we communicate, what we communicate, even what we were talking about earlier about the impact of communities on it's what we do. So
Absolutely. So look, you have a significant amount of refrigerated and frozen portfolio, right?
Mhm.
Like, so you do. So how long do you think it's going to take until frozen commerce now catches up with ambient?
I think it's going to be a matter of how much of the population that we can access with the distribution network. Now you're seeing a lot of emerging platforms that are solving for that, right? Ultimate convenience and shortening the delivery time so that refrigeration and cold management are not issues. I don't think we're that far away. I think there are networks, there are capabilities, and consumer demand is increasing, as you described your own experience, where you want to some order from home and have it show up. We're seeing new distribution models. We're seeing new partners step into that space. So I don't think we're far away. And I think it's something that everyone should be prepared for. One, the consumer expectation is continuing to grow. And, there's going to be a lot of opportunity there for us to meet that demand.
Absolutely. So hey, I know we have a couple minutes left, so I want to actually I want to ask a fun question as well. Like,
Okay.
how in the world did that Donny Osmond and Lil Yachty collaboration come about for the Chef Boyardee? Like, please share. We want to know how this happened.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. We found some, in social listening, you find some fans you wouldn't expect that love a product or a brand who really wanted to celebrate it. And that was a collaboration that said, wow, you're a fan. And then they actually got together and said, this would be fun. And just really thought, like, what would this look like? What's the art of the possible here? And then we let them be creative. And that's a great example of pure creativity. And you sit back and you go, wow, that's awesome, right?
Wait, can you, for the folks who might not have seen it, can you just give a really quick brief, like what it was? Because it was
it's
pretty amazing.
It's essentially a music video on Chef Boyardee when we launched, some new products, and then Yachty and Donnie made a video and celebrating that product and how much they really liked it. So,
well, I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing you in the next shoot of that.
Probably not. I'm going to just keep doing my marketing work here in my office. I'll let the experts do the creativity.
Well, look, I'm going to just add, we're going to end with one last question here, just because I think it's an important one. For any folks that are watching right now, what last advice would you give them on really growing their commerce business, given the time that we're in right now as of today?
Yeah, I think everyone in the commerce space, regardless of role, are going to have to understand these emerging trends around social commerce and a lot of what entrepreneurial brands are doing to really create a presence that's different than how we operate in sort of what I call large organizations. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're seeing new and creative and innovative ways to reach consumers, from live streaming and people connecting and influencers and direct buys off of some of these platforms. I think they're fundamentally changing the nature of commerce, right? We have direct to consumer, we have B2B to C, we have home shipment, we have home delivery, and that's just now, right? As you just described, all the different things we're seeing emerge. So I think everyone participating, from what we call brand or sales to marketing, all of that's converging. And we're going to have to understand how consumers are making these decisions and accessing these products. And it's all just sort of converging at an accelerated rate.
Amazing. This is dope, man. This is dope. I guess one last question that actually came through was, are there any predictions for the next few years in commerce space when it actually comes to emerging tech?
Emerging tech. Yeah, I think it's going to be around delivery and consumer access, as you just said. As we think about the consumer choice of going in or getting it to home, what's happening in the home and home-based tech is really going to be, I think, redefining for us, right? We're calling it the living room. It's the TV, it's the mobile device, it's the smart speakers, it's the home and tech around the consumers. Concept of home, I think, is going to be defining when it comes to our space.
Yeah, that's a good. I'm sorry, man. They're coming through. I'm just going to ask another one real quick that just came through, which was, what has been your favorite marketing campaign to work on throughout your career?
Throughout my career, wow.
But it has to be one only with VML. Why not? No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I've worked on a lot of great brands, so I think it would be a disservice to call out so many, right? So I worked on some great stuff when we were at in automotive for many years, and I'm proud of what my team does here. So I don't know. It's hard for me to point to any one specific execution. So
here's a.
And I don't want. I'm being politically correct because I have so many great brands in my portfolio and I have so much work that I'm proud of in those organizations. I don't want to call one specific.
So I get that, but let me ask this one then.
Okay.
Has there been a brand, maybe not one that you worked on, but a brand that you over the past few years have really idolized and thought like, wow, these guys are getting it right. Yeah. And I'm really loving the work that they're actually doing.
Yeah, it's one that I worked at and I will call out because I have lots of friends there, and it was Subaru car brand. Not everyone knows that it was a pretty small brand back when we were there, but it's quadrupled or more of a 5x increase in its sales. And what I love about that brand is it really leaned into what people loved about it and built around it and celebrated it. And they truly celebrated their consumers. And they have outsized retention and repurchase rates and all these positive attributes. But their consumers were at the core of what they did. And I think it's a true testament to understanding them, again, leaning into that and then celebrating that every way possible. I think it's a great case study for, long-term strength. So.
Absolutely. Well, look, man, you, as always, Delu, have been incredible. I personally appreciate your time, and I know everyone else here does as well, for you to come on and talk about what you do. So thank you, man. This has been dope.
All right. Great to see you.
Can we do this in person at some point with maybe like a drink in hand too?
Yes. Yes and yes.
Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely. Yes, stay tuned.
Look forward to that.
We're working on some stuff. Yeah, stay tuned there. Trying to get people back together. But yeah,
Nice.
until then, seriously, thank you so much for both being here, and hope you'll consider coming back on our stage soon.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take it easy, everyone.
All right.
Yeah.
Great to see you guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Take care.
Have a great rest of the day.
You too.
Okay, that was a fantastic second session of the day. And now on to our third. So this next session, which was pre-recorded, actually features a fantastic marketer. We have Rachel Henke. Rachel is the Senior Director of Brand and B2B Campaigns at Dell Technologies, and her session was moderated by Charlie Theodoros. Charlie is the Managing Partner at MediaCom. So we're going to tee that up for you right now, and I'll be back towards the end.
My name is Charlie Fiordalis, and I'm the moderator here. I'm a managing partner at MediaCom, and I'm joined by Rachel Henke, who's a senior director of brand and B2B campaigns at Dell Technologies. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you.
And we have worked together for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
I just celebrated my 4-year anniversary.
Yeah.
Other exciting news, this is the first time I've put on a button-down shirt in like 2 weeks, and it feels empowering.
Yeah. I wear, anything with a button these days is definitely mind-blowing challenge. Yeah.
Well, I'm feeling like I miss a little of the formality of things. And I think it's nice to talk a little bit about B2B, because you can't help but talk about B2B without sitting up a little straighter. Because we're talking about business here, and you did it as well, right?
I know, you just said it and I immediately sprung to attention.
And I mean, there have been these moments in the last year where we have to be at work through our computers, but we're at home. I mean, there's the boundary between work and life is now gone. The boundary between business to business and business to consumer is much thinner. Like if you're a B2B buyer and you're at home, you're also the pandemic, you're at home, you're a consumer as well, all of this. And there's a lot of accelerated change. And I mean, my first question is that so much has been written on the effects of COVID on consumer behavior. And we all really resonate with that because we're consumers. But, there's an equally large effect that this has had on B2B.
Yeah.
And of course, none of us saw COVID coming, but what did you think would be changing in the near future at the beginning of 2020?
Yeah.
And then what actually did?
Okay. So that's a lot to unpack here. So one thing I do want to level set to, because this is a B2B conversation, is that there are so many ways you can buy technology as a B2B, and then there's their financing. We could go down the rabbit hole. We won't do that. But to simplify it, you can buy direct, usually through a direct relationship with a sales rep. So at Dell Technologies, you have your Dell Technologies sales rep. You can also buy through a reseller, which we call the channel, which is like basically a relationship that is managed by a channel partner. So that's actually a significant amount of how our technology is sold, especially in rest of the world outside the US. So our customers really can buy technology increasingly. They've actually, before COVID set in, it was like they wanted to do more self-service as well, like online. So really kind of like taking a little bit of that human relationship away, because a lot of they were educated and they're like, hey, we can do this ourselves. So that we noticed that shift as well, which is that self-service. But it's interesting to see some of this shifting and really, really fast. So before COVID, that there was a lot of indicators of how things were starting to evolve. So B2B historically, if you look back, has really been sales-led, personalized, white glove service, if you will, type of experience. But we already saw some of those changes in behavior with B2B organizations indicating that, hey, like I said, we can do this ourselves. And really driving those purchases online. We have what we call a premier site, which is for B2B customers. And so we already saw some of the self-service B2B commerce sales go up. And so it was around 14% in 2015, and it was up to 18% in 2019, just before COVID. And so at the same time, purchases through sales reps declined. So you can see that a lot of ITs were taking this on themselves. So they also why they have larger buying teams, and so a lot of the businesses are taking that IT in-house. And so for us, that meant that we needed to make sure that not only did our sales reps and channel have all this information, we needed to make sure that we had all this content and materials, from outcomes to specs to cost, available to them, online as well. So those were some of the biggest shifts that we started seeing as we started to enter COVID. But then the other trend, which I know we're going to dive in deeper, which is really about the ownership of the technology itself and the maintenance.
So how is Dell Technologies evolving for this? I mean, it's amazing that we already had this shift going towards B2B buyers being more self-directed and having a much larger audience to go after. We've shifted our budgets and our tactics going much more towards digital to have more personalized conversations, with them. But it's not enough just to do that. You also have to evolve your business. So how's Dell Technologies evolve their business for these shifts in buyer behavior?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things, and we'll spend some time on this today, is really what we call as a service, which is renting versus owning, or if you look at it, how I like to compare it is think of it as a utility company, which is you pay for what you use. So no longer are companies starting to own it. So it's like with people when you talk about that consumerism of it. But that just creeping into B2B, it's like the Netflix of something. So the Netflix of movies, music, this is like the Netflix of B2B IT. It's a subscription model. And so according to Gartner, more than half of enterprise technology buyers now say that they're going to start acquiring tech via subscription versus actually like owning and managing it on premise themselves.
Yeah, it really makes sense. I mean, we've seen such incredible demand around it and interest, and I haven't been surprised. I mean, I always feel very fortunate to work with Dell Technologies, just because, like, even at the beginning of the pandemic, I was thinking, oh, this is terrible. You know, terrible things are happening. But I work with a company that saw this coming. You know what I mean? Like, Dell Technologies has helped so many companies through this to be able to virtualize their workforces, to be able to, you know, to enable all of us to connect together and to continue on business. And I mean, I see some of the reasons, but from your point of view, why are B2B buyers moving towards, you know, a subscription model for their corporate technology needs?
Well, I mean, to start, it's much simpler. So you actually don't have to own the technology and maintain it and fix it and repair it. So if you think of like a huge data center, right? That is, especially for even like some small and mid-sized companies that have a lot of data. I mean, that can take up a huge footprint of your organization or a warehouse. And so if you don't actually have to own that technology and manage it, you're saving labor costs, you're saving headaches. You're saving all of that initial, like having to manage that infrastructure. So we do all of that. So we're just like selling a service. We're not selling the boxes itself. It also allows for greater agility. And this is where we see a lot of the benefits. So say a business needs to increase their storage capacity quickly. In the past, they would have to call their sales rep, get a quote, maybe get a competing quote, hope that it's in their budget, order the equipment, get the equipment, install it, and hopefully you're up and running in a few weeks. But realistically, it's probably a few months, depending on the supply chain. And then you have to manage all of it as well. You have to have like employees manage it as well. Now, like this can literally happen overnight. Okay, you need more storage? So we tend to, for as a service, we over provision. So basically we put more technology, available than they're actually using at the time. So it's really available and ready to turn on instantly, transparent pricing, which really brings me to that next benefit, which is control. So customers can really dial up or dial down the technology they need at any given moment, and you only pay for what you use. The other part that we get a lot is just the security, and a lot of different organizations need to have their technology on premise or hybrid, and so we've really figured this out through what we call our as a service Apex. That's what we call our as a service model. And so we have figured out through Apex of how to manage that on-prem security control requirements and still just pay for what you use. So, really this overall flexibility saves businesses what they need most, which is time. And so their time can be spent running their business, rather than trying to get that technology to support it. And I heard a quote once that I really like, and I keep remembering, I don't even know who to attribute it to, but it was really this theory of like, we're going from businesses running at the speed of their technology to technology running at the speed that your business needs. So no longer does technology become that bottleneck. It really becomes that enabler to help businesses go to the next level right away.
As a service is tremendously powerful. And I know it's been coming towards technology for a long time, specifically in maybe more specialist companies. But Dell Technologies is the first to be able to do it, fully end to end across everything.
We're getting there. We're not there yet, but we're getting there.
Hey, I'm in marketing.
Sorry about that.
So are you. We can say this. Yeah. But really, where are companies kind of starting? What areas and how are they navigating that as a service choice?
Well, So everyone's heard of the cloud. So that's the really the easy way in. But we're really expanding that. So earlier this month, we announced our as a service portfolio called Apex. And we already had those cloud offerings, and we called them on demand, but now they're really part of our Apex portfolio. Coming out of the gate, we'll continue with the cloud. But we're really starting off, let's just say, our lead solution that we're looking for is Apex Data Storage Services. And so according to IDC, in the next year or two, like by 2024, more than half of all that data center infrastructure will be consumed as a service. So not only do we need to be in this space, and we wanted to make sure that we're leading in this space. So, but we're not stopping there. So our vision really is to start to look at our entire technology portfolio for business and perhaps even consumer down the road, and have it be available as a service. So, for one day example, you want to have PC as a service. And, if you look at the consumer world, which B2B has largely been inspired by for a lot of this, is that they're getting used to having like a new phone every year. And sometimes you pay a monthly fee. And so that really guarantees you to have the latest technology in your hands. Well, businesses are saying the same thing. They want their employees to have the best laptop at any given time. And so, this really does help for employee retention, but then it also just allows them to make sure that the greatest technology at any given moment. So, the benefits really are just that higher productivity, lower cost, in terms of like being able to maintain that. And so, and really, we're excited about it. And some of the customers we've been talking to are really excited about it as well. And as a marketer, this is a really great proposition to put in the marketplace in an exciting way. And, not to lead anyone on or anything, but next month, keep your eye out. We're going to start to really put our Apex campaign into the marketplace and really launch as a service, in a big, broad way. And it's going to be, let's just say, explosive. We're really excited. So, all right. Let's so as we've discussed, so I'm really more in this B2B space, but Charlie, you work across all of Dell Technologies. And so when we were talking about having this conversation, we were saying, how do we cover both most effectively? So we're going to talk to you about consumer.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So want to understand kind of the same thing. Like, what did you think will be changing in the near future at the beginning of 2020?
Well, our profession is all about change. Even when I went towards digital in the mid 90s, it was because it was new, it was exciting, and that's what's kept us sharp and engaged for decades on this. Is that it's a continuing journey. Something is always changing. And I think if I were to look back at all the slide decks that I've made over the past many years, a good number of them have a slide in there about like the pace of change and everything that's changing. Like, change really is kind of the only constant. So even before COVID, we were already talking about, what are the major changes that are going to happen? Media usage is one of those, that we expected a continuation of the digital trends, that online video ads would continue to go up, that social media usage would continue to go up, not necessarily Facebook and Instagram. We were already looking at TikTok pretty strongly even before they were the biggest pandemic hit out there. And CTV as well. 4 years ago, we were doing tests on CTV. And within the next couple of years, depending on shifts in the market, it could become the primary way that we advertise, on television. All we really need is somebody like Netflix to have an ad-supported tier. So Netflix, I'm encouraging you, if you listen to this, I would love an ad-supported tier, and I think your consumers would as well. You're going to go to 1 billion if you do that. So I thought those are going to change. I also thought esports, that we were going to have an expected continuation of growth. This is not just because I have kids who are 13, 11, and 9 who are all avid gamers, and I feel like I'm in the middle of it. It's everyone. Everyone has gotten into gaming in a big way. Even before COVID, during COVID, it's significantly taken off. And then podcasts. We made this really big bet on podcasts in 2020, and launching the Dell Small Business Podference. And we've continued to do that this year, of course. And just podcasts are this wonderful area where people don't separate what they're hearing from who they're hearing it from. Like, they think that the host is their friend and the host of the show is telling them that they use this product. It's kind of an amazing.
They're not my friend? Oh my gosh.
They are, absolutely. Joe Rogan's
I know.
my best friend.
I'm a huge podcast. I could list off like a lot of, especially business podcasts. I love them. I walk and listen to them all the time. No, but here, the funny thing about COVID, in, across different industries, when COVID hit, it really like paused a lot of industries. But with technology, it was like opposite. Like it accelerated it, and with that media. So, what were some of those things that you were like maybe surprised with COVID? Like what really like super sped up in your world as well?
Oh, there were, yeah, so many surprises. And I look back at it thinking about what it was like to experience it. And I just have to do a quick shout out to Brian Weiser, who's our essentially head of business intelligence across all of Group M. And he really helped us navigate it. He had, Thursday morning calls for the duration of things. And I would join those calls and like just furiously writing down notes because I was, surprised by how fast things were shifting. And I think we've actually gotten used to a faster pace of change throughout this. If I were to look at it, media usage, it's still the same things. Media usage and esports and podcasts really changed. But on media usage, TV was up, like not long term, but there was this moment, for a couple of months where the TV curve shifted and we went back a couple of years in terms of, reach. And that was amazing to see in the short term. And it was actually right about the time that oil futures went negative. I mean, crazy things were happening, and oil futures going negative was essentially saying you have to store it somewhere and there's nowhere to even store it. And there's no value of this thing that you have. It was incredibly crazy. And for TV, there's so much more television out there now because this is an available inventory. Television commercials are based on, on puts, like people using television, and so many more people were using television. And that, so the reality is that online video is really still continues to erode, traditional television as, platforms like YouTube become more popular and they reach more TV devices. And, social media wasn't just up slightly. It was up, just like 25% year over year in terms of just looking at something really even like ad volume. Esports was really up significantly too. And in terms of esports, I think Twitch is a really good bellwether to look at. Like we get very good data on what's going on with Twitch. And they've tripled in size with the average number of viewers, increasing from around 1 million a month at the end of 2019 to 3 million in 2021.
I didn't realize it was that high. That's crazy.
Yeah, I've actually found things like I was not a gamer before this, and I have found myself watching because I started playing with my kids to really connect with them. There's nothing like playing a video game with your kids and then they actually talk to you like you're a kid.
I know, right? Yeah.
You get that as well?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I mean, I'm not going to drop what they play, but yeah, it's probably like simpler versions. But oh my gosh, they're obsessed. They spend their allowance. That's where it goes, So yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, I invested in Roblox as quickly as I could. And
I would say, that's exactly that's where all my money's going right now. But the great part is even like during the pandemic, it was such a social outlet for them because you couldn't have those in-person play dates. So they figured out how to call each other, and then they just kind of like sit on the phone all day, but then play Roblox at the same time, and they loved it. They had so much fun.
Yeah, I think that's another thing, really big thing that we saw with esports is that people really needed a new way to connect with each other. And there's something that's very immediate and transactional about texting. Certainly the same thing, happens with any type of like email. It's very transactional, but if you're in a video game environment, you can focus on one thing and talk about another, like, and another big trend that's going on is people watching old television shows and having viewing parties with their friends, watching Friends. That
okay.
type of a thing.
I like that now. That's good. Yeah.
It's been nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last one is podcast. It performed quite well. Very timely innovation for small businesses that we made with our small business podference, which is actually going on this month as well. If you want to search for it on wherever you get your
small
podcasts.
Yeah.
And so I thought it would be up 20 to 30% in 2020. And so far that we're seeing that consumption is up at least 30%, this year on podcasts.
Well, and the crazy part about B2B, because I always have to put my B2B plug in here, was just like the speed of digital transformation. And I'm not sure if I'm remembering this right, but it was one of those like questions of who inspired your digital transformation, during COVID? Was it your CEO, your CIO, or COVID itself? And of course, it was COVID itself. It was just such a catalyst for like, oh my gosh, I think IT departments knew they needed to do this and they had it in their their roadmaps. But all of a sudden, COVID hit and was like, okay, we got to do this right now. And that speed was just like fascinating to watch and be a part of, and it's really exciting about where we are coming out of this too. So I was actually surprised at the speed of that digital transformation in that road. Were there any changes that surprised you?
Oh, there were plenty. And I love being surprised because, I think actually one of the keys to being a good marketer is just having opinions. Mm-hmm. Like if you come up with an opinion, it means that you've committed towards, a bet in your mind of something going in direction. And then when it doesn't go that direction, it forces you to kind of re-examine what your assumptions are, and you get a lot of insight from that. So laptop sales really, really surprised me as part of COVID.
Oh my gosh.
Rediscovered laptops. Did you buy any laptops at the beginning of this?
Not only did I order one, but like all my friends did too. So at Dell Technologies, I'm an employee, so I get these discount codes. And in the past, I throw one out to my friends whenever, they needed one. There is a limit on them. And I actually reached my limit of giving them out, which has like never happened to me because of this, like everyone's needing to refresh, or they going into COVID, they're like, I want the best, system I can have because this is something I'm going to be on and using a lot. And that was absolutely true.
Yeah, I bought 3 Dell laptops at the beginning of this as well. I bought, new Chromebooks for my kids because their school ones were not working very well. I was like, let me just go get something that I know is going to work very well. And then XPS is the standard in our household. If you're related to me and you don't own an XPS, that's what I buy for you.
Pitch, I do the same thing. I've gotten a lot of people to a different computer by just talking about XPS. You get touch screen, it's sleek, it's, blah, blah, blah.
And, the average length of ownership going into this was approaching 6 years. People would have a laptop. But during COVID, screens were our only means of connection to people.
Yeah.
Mobile screens were just not big enough. Mm-mm. So laptop sales really surged. And I think people are going to be surprised by how much better laptops have gotten in the last 5 years. And this all really makes me think of Apex, of as a service for laptops, because things really do get better every year. And we all upgrade our phones. I see that as a very valuable proposition to business.
And you think of like I'm sorry, interrupted. But
no, I was good. Yeah.
Of ownership, but then that S curve of innovation too, which is like it just keeps increasing. So even though laptops are lasting longer, which is great really from a consumer perspective, but in business, you typically want to have the best, fastest processors. So I really, and there are some consumers who absolutely want that too, especially those gamers. And so I do feel like this could be a niche to get into because, people want to have the latest in their hands, and it's exciting.
Yeah, so definitely laptops. And then the other one was online groceries.
I was part of that.
Yeah. And so Work said that e-commerce grew 30 times faster than average, than their average pace. It's so incredible. And it's like that in context, that doesn't surprise me. But what surprises me is that they say 75% of consumers shift towards digital groceries will actually be a permanent shift. And I'm surprised by that because, I actually do I like choosing my own thing. I thought that I did. I thought that I valued going to the grocery store. Okay. And now I realize that there's this one innovation that as many marketers can take. I think this is something that everyone should think about how they can take advantage of this innovation, which is the one-click add to cart. If you ordered something before and it was a basket of goods, what is, the way that you can just shorten the number of clicks. And so now when I go to Seamless, I reorder my last order.
Yep.
When
Same
I
thing.
go get groceries, I start with what I ordered before, and then I customize it a little bit. And the amount of time it saves is unbelievable.
Yeah, I do Shipped. And I was actually an early adopter. I mean, I'm a working mom. And so like I was actually doing that. And when COVID hit, like it was really hard to find a slot. And I'm like, hey, everybody, like I was doing this before you. But like, now it's like, I don't go to the grocery store anymore because I just, it's just so easy. I can just do it from my desk and, they're there at the end of the day. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Lots of changes.
Lots of changes. And I'm happy we're going to be able to meet those together, but that's our topics. That's our
Well,
topics.
this was fun to cover both B2B and consumer.
That was fun. I like doing that with you. That was very good. And so Rachel, thank you so much for your time today. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to work together to evolve with consumers, and realize the future of commerce. And anyone who's watching this, if you're interested in reaching out to either of us on LinkedIn or anywhere else, we're happy to connect with you.
Yeah. Thanks, y'all.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Bye.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much to Rachel and Charlie for their chat. I felt like it was two friends having a conversation, very relatable. You can tell they have a great relationship. So special thanks to them and appreciate them pre-recording their session today. So let's continue on to the next exciting session, which is with a regular on our Brand Innovator stage. Please welcome Chad Mitchell. Chad's the Vice President of Head of Content and Digital Platforms at TD Bank. And Chad's going to be joined today by his moderator, Benjamin. Hi, Benjamin.
Hi.
Hey.
You hear me?
Social for Ogilvy. Hey, what's going on?
Good. We're excited to be here.
We
Looking
are
forward to a great conversation.
Yes. And hi, Chad.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, good. Thanks for taking the time today.
Certainly. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, you guys have a good chat, and I'll be back towards the end.
Sure. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank
Hi,
you.
everyone. Happy Monday. I'm Benjamin Snyers. I'm leading social and performance for Ogilvy North America. And I will be the moderator for the session today. And with me, we have Chad Mitchell from TD Ameritrade, Vice President, Head of Content and Digital Platforms.
Hey,
Hi,
Benjamin.
Chad. How have you been?
I'm
Doing well?
great. You are one of the happiest people I've ever seen on a Monday.
Yeah, I know. And it's not my favorite day of the week. I usually prefer Friday, but I'm doing the extra effort. So today we want to talk with you all about a few things, about commerce, obviously, but we want to talk about how you can intersect content and commerce really to create a big impact for your brand. So really what we are trying to highlight in this conversation is how combining storytelling and content really can drive performance. So we'll do this with Chad. What are the best ways to connect with the mind and the hearts of the consumer? So we'll have a conversation for 30 minutes, and then we would like to open it up to all the participants. So please, if you have a question, leave it in the Q&A. I will moderate, and we will be able to retrieve your question and discuss with Chad. But before we jump into the conversation, maybe let's do a quick round of introduction. So Chad, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Benjamin. So Chad Mitchell, Head of Content and Digital Platforms at TD Bank. Head up our brand storytelling team that sits inside of our communications and public affairs entity at TD Bank. And prior to that, I've done a couple of stints in agency land, headed up the content team at Walmart for about 8 years. And prior to that was involved really in a lot of different things of dealing with politics, government relations, policy-oriented stuff in the DC area, and just have always found myself in communications roles and in storytelling, and probably wasn't exactly sure what it was 20, 25 years ago, but now I know that it was storytelling. It was just storytelling around a candidate or a policy issue as opposed to a brand. So been doing that for quite some time and really enjoying what we're doing at TD Bank. I'm glad to be here to talk to you today.
Awesome. So I'm Benjamin Snijers. I come from Belgium. I started my career there in a startup called Radionomy that basically helped everyone create their web radio for free. And there I was in charge of digital marketing, sending newsletter, managing the blog, the forum, managing the social network, the search marketing, and all of that. Great experience. We didn't have a lot of budget, so we had to be very creative and really maximize how organic could impact everything we did. Then I created a company, Social Lab, social media marketing agency with 3 business partners. In Belgium, we grew the company in Europe, France, and Amsterdam. And in 2013, WPP acquired the company. That's when I joined the amazing Ogilvy family. In 2015, I moved to New York to launch the social team within Ogilvy in the US. And right now, I'm in charge of the social and performance team across North America. We have people who do media, content creation, influencer marketing, social marketing across North America, New York, DC, Chicago, Toronto, and the West Coast. All right, are you ready, Chad? I have a
Ready,
few
let's
questions
go.
for you. I did my
Yeah.
homework, I prepared. So I have a few. But the first one would be more of a personal question. And it's related to COVID. So what I really would like to know is how have you tweaked your day-to-day? What's your COVID hack? What have you changed in your life to make the whole COVID experience a more enjoyable experience?
It was the really cost affordable wine from Trader Joe's that we've been partaking in over the last year to get us through it. They do have fantastically priced wine that is delicious, by the way. I did find that out during COVID. I wasn't much of a wine buyer from Trader Joe's, but in reality, I think for me, Benjamin, it was more about building out some time with my family. I am based in the Northern Virginia area. TD Bank is in Mount Laurel, so I was on the road a lot. Our team has pretty much always been, what we're now referring to as hybrid, but we were dispersed. I had a couple folks in New York City. I had a couple folks in the New Jersey area. I was obviously down here in the Northern Virginia area. And so there wasn't a lot that we needed to do from a team standpoint. There wasn't a lot that we needed to do to adjust to work. It was just more, I was home all the time. And I think that got frustrating for my family. It probably got a little frustrating for me. I like to be out and about with my team. I like to travel for work, whether it was to New York, New Jersey. And so for us, it was really about creating some differences during the week. So Thursday became a big pizza night for us, trying all of the local pizza in the Northern Virginia area that would deliver. We started binge watching shows that we hadn't watched. And then I had my daughter was wrapping up her senior year in high school and getting ready to go to college, and nobody knew what that was going to look like until it happened. So there was a lot of family time built around the TV and getting out where we could, and sneaking off for trips with just the 4 of us, or being able to see my parents in very sort of buttoned up situations. So we just tried to make the best of it. But I've read the stories about people who have taken up new hobbies or read a lot of books, and I didn't do a lot of that. So I can't look back over the last 12, 14 months and say that I fundamentally changed my life or started an exercise routine or started, I've always enjoyed cooking. I've always enjoyed yard work. They're 2 things that actually de-stress me. So I did a lot of those, and then just tried to adapt and do the best that you could during a tough situation.
Awesome. So you didn't start baking?
No. We stopped when you ran out of yeast, and as we all saw, there were supply chain problems with a lot of different things. And so whether it was the toilet paper scarcity or then not being able to get yeast, we were not baking as much as other people. We were on the short end of the stick in terms of getting yeast. And now when we go to Sam's Club or any of those places, I see 50-pound bags of yeast. So get your yeast now, in case we end up locked down again.
In case it's too late. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, glad you're here. It brought you closer to your family. I think it's a really nice answer. What about your team? How did you and your team adapt to COVID? Did it change anything, the way you work remotely?
Well, a little bit, Benjamin. I think that as a content creator and in charge of our editorial strategy, in charge of creating content and distributing it every day, one of the things I was never successful in doing at Walmart was bringing in this idea of like a daily scrum, a morning meeting where we could look at the calendar and plan things out. And, um, you know, um, during COVID, what we were able to do was get the team together for a lot of different reasons, but one of them was checking in with each other in the morning to make sure we knew what was going on during the day. And I think what we've all seen over the last 14 months is you had COVID, then we had sort of massive social justice movements across the country that just required content creators and distributors to be really on top of their game. So having those morning meetings allowed us to really stay on top of it. But as I mentioned to you before, we've always been pretty remote or hybrid. And so when I've gone up to New Jersey, I was typically up in the office 2 or 3 days a week. And then, my team would try to get in, or I would go to New York to be with the other members of my team. And so we were always, I think, a combination of FaceTime and then not FaceTime, and going to COVID where we were just all on the computers. It wasn't too much of a change for us. It wasn't terribly disruptive. I think we were able to find our jam. We were able to get into a groove pretty early on. I think as a people leader and as a people manager, one of the changes that we put in place and our leadership team at TD was really dispensing of a lot of the sort of office talk and the professional talk. So our one-on-ones became much more about personal connections and what's happening in your life and how can we help, and what could we do for people. I've got a team that's in a bunch of different situations. I've got single people who are living alone in apartments. I've got married people who are surrounded by family the way that I am. I've got one of my guys was engaged, so he's trying to plan a wedding. I've got another, so we had all these kinds of different situations. And so just having the opportunity to visit with people on a personal level really allowed, I think, the bonds of our team to grow even more than they had when we were working together. So I will say that we've seen all these stories about some of the businesses who are trying to return to work. We've seen some of the CEOs who have made some questionable statements about productivity. My team can be productive remote. We can be productive hybrid. We all want to see each other again because we're communicators, we're type A's, we're extroverts, and so being around each other and the give and forth that goes with creating content through a natural conversation and seeing each other in an office is something that we're all looking forward to doing again. But we were never in an office 5 days a week. I don't think we'll ever be our content team, and so we found a good way to stay connected. I think 14 months now, 15 months, however long it's been, we're closer than we've ever been, and we just genuinely enjoy each other's companies. Our calls are the highlights of my days because they're funny, they're unpredictable. Somebody's always got a story, and so it's been not just making the best of a bad situation. It's sort of thriving, not just surviving, but thriving as a team.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned personal connection. I have to say we have seen the same thing happening at Ogilvy. For us, relationships are very important, and knowing how others are doing is also extremely important. But also talking about the simple things of the daily life. So we started reorganizing a new type of meeting, 101, taking breakfast together on Zoom, having a lunch, or even doing cooking class after work for the team. So we found ways to maintain that relationship going.
Yeah, likewise on our end. I think it's been critically important, and there's times where we've overdone it, and you can just tell by the look on people's faces that we're having yet another virtual happy hour. Really, do we need to do this again?
No virtual happy hour, no those ones.
We just have to find the right balance and give people the space they need. And when you opt out, you opt out, and if you opt in, you opt in. And we've now enforced some camera-free days, some meeting-free days, just to try to free people up, because I think we're all sort of guilty of probably having worked more from home than we ever did when we were in the office. There's no commute, there's no real long lunch hour. I think we've all been giving, more than 110% for a long, long time. And so I think you're probably seeing the same thing I am, which is these reports of widespread burnout, and 50 to 55% of people are looking for a new job. And, there's some talk about some sort of revolution in the workforce after this in terms of are people going to be looking for new jobs. And so we're just trying to be mindful of what our folks are going through.
Yeah, there is definitively some Zoom fatigue.
Yes.
And we have to manage the balance. So you mentioned the social justice movement, which is obviously a very important topic for all of us and a key moment in history. So can you tell us a little bit how you and your team have adapted, how you're embracing diversity and inclusion, how is changing the way TD Ameritrade is communicating?
It has been a very difficult year, for everybody. And for those of us that are not part of the African American community or Asian American community, I think reaching out to colleagues who are and understanding what they're feeling and what they're going through and how you can be an ally is really critical. And I've been part of doing that. I've watched my team do that, and it's really about all of the different emotions that we're all going through and how do you have what are really difficult conversations. And TD has built a very diverse and inclusive culture where these conversations are part of what we do. And so they've been awkward at times to have, but the company supports them. We're creating a platform, for people who have not typically had voice before. And so any role that my team and I can play in building a platform or creating content that gives rise to those underserved communities who haven't typically had a seat at the table and share their voice, share their experience. That's what we've been trying to do, from a content and storytelling standpoint. From a team standpoint, I think what it's done is it's really put a focus on being very careful about images that you're selecting and making sure that you're bouncing ideas off of a lot of different people. And we did this a lot at Walmart when I was there, and we do it at TD, where you sort of take stock of who's in the room. And if you look around and everybody looks like me, then we don't have the right people in the room, and we need to make sure that we're inviting the right people into the right meetings to weigh in on creative or to take a look at something through their eyes to make sure, is this image capturing what we want to capture? Is this exploitative? Is this not exploitative? All of those sorts of things. And so I think, Benjamin, there's how do you create an environment that can be supportive in tough times? And I think we've tried to do that not only on my team, but on our broader communications and public affairs team and across the enterprise at TD. And then, what does it mean for a team that's creating content and developing stories? It's just, it's the extra scrutiny that you go through and the extra steps of a review process that you go through to be just very careful about what you're putting into market and realizing the context behind what you're doing.
Okay, thank you. So Chad, obviously, as we can see, you are very passionate about your work and what you do every day. So when we talk about our job, at the center is really the work we produce. So maybe tell us, what's the piece of work that you have done that you are the most proud of with TD or even in a past life?
Well, yeah, I mean, at TD, it was last year, in the height of the pandemic when the federal government rolled out the Paycheck Protection Program. And, we knew that TD was playing a big role in that. And within our footprint, we were the number one lender to small businesses, which we've all heard about through this pandemic. Just the burden that small business has carried and the impact that COVID has had on businesses having to shut down and lay people off and being able to come back to work. And so we developed a series called Backbone of the Economy, and it really came from some talking points from our CEO about, the small businesses, the community partners that we work with being the backbone of the economy and being the thing that was going to keep the economy moving forward, keep our communities moving forward. And we were able to go out and find some stories of people who in a lot of cases managed to do quite well. Whether they moved to mobile ordering, whether they moved to pick up, we had a coffee shop. I think one of the more unique stories was a place called Theater Works in Connecticut. And considering theaters were shut down, what were they able to bring to the community that was helpful and valuable? And when I think about, content that works, I think it's content that helps. Content that helps sells. And so, they were able to switch to your point. They did some cooking shows that had some flair to them because they're a theater company. They also then used their costume department to make PPE equipment. So, being able to find the stories of those folks, and then some of the things that our colleagues were doing to support the real heroes, which were the frontline workers, right? And the doctors and the nurses, and bringing meals or creating or using their experience to make equipment for all of those people on the front lines, and making sure that we were very careful about the word heroics. I hear that word thrown around a lot, and I don't like it being assigned to a communications team. I don't think what we did was heroic. I think we did our job, but being able to tell the stories of the real heroes was sort of a highlight for us, and really enjoyed being able to tell those stories through the eyes of people, of the people who were living it, which I think then gives people a better sense as to our brand. And what I find to be unique and differentiated about TD are these stories. And when you get to read those stories and you get to interact with these people, I think you get a real feel for who we are as a company and who we are as a bank.
Yes. So obviously the pandemic has highly impacted the way we work, but it also opened the door for more innovation. And some people are asking in the Q&A, and it's a question I had, what are the trends, what are the innovation you've seen appearing in content production?
Yeah, so we're a bank. No secret, TD Bank. Banks are not going to be your brand innovators, I don't think. When you think about this group that we're partnering with today, and when I think about innovative brands, and I look across the spectrum to see what brands are doing to move things forward, whether it's e-commerce. I heard the last session there was an awful lot about online groceries. Having worked at Walmart when they rolled that out, I'm very intimately involved in online groceries, and I was an early adopter in that space. And Wegmans has now, at least in our neck of the woods, gone to scan and go, which is just fantastic to go through a Wegmans or a Sam's Club and be able to scan stuff on your phone and get out of there. Banks aren't exactly innovative. We've been around for 150 years. The products that we offer are pretty. They're pretty typical. There's nothing real sexy about opening a bank account or taking out a mortgage. And so really what I'm seeing are a couple things. Number one, we were able to innovate in a couple of areas. And again, I think the previous panelists touched on this in terms of, your IT department was more willing to go along with things. Our HR department was more willing to go along with things. Budget seemed to be a little bit easier to secure during COVID, when everybody's scrambling to figure out how do we communicate with our people? How do we make sure they know what's going on with COVID precautions or their job? And so we were able to get into podcasting. It was not the most successful thing we've tried. We started at Benjamin with a focus on internal, because we figured we could talk to our people. I don't know how big of an audience you're ever going to get doing an internal podcast. So we started to get some guests that could help us position the show externally. So we're still thinking through what the right play for us is there. But I do see that on an awful lot with brands getting involved, whether it's, Clubhouse, so it's audio, and it's voice, it's podcasting. So that to me is a trend that I think is going to continue to be explored. I've always thought, and I didn't say this, but podcasting is such an intimate one-to-one connection. And if we can find the right format for TD and we can get directly into people's ears, I think that's a place where we can go. I think the previous panelists were also talking about gaming and TikToking and user generated content. Again, banks we're not going to take the first step into a place like TikTok or Clubhouse or some of these emerging platforms. I often wish that we would. There are brands that I'm envious of who seem to be early adopters on a lot of platforms, and I think that could be a lot of fun. It could probably be terrifying at times because you're out there without a safety net. So I do see some things happening there, and then I think one of the interesting things, I don't know if it's a trend yet, Benjamin, but when I think about the ways video production were just fundamentally changed during COVID and not being able to go out, and what I saw our visual storytelling team do, and from the start, when everything sort of looked like the Blair Witch Project, to something that we did this week for our spring management conference, it was one of those moments where I meant to pay a compliment to my team, and my email said something like, "I cannot believe the quality of these videos." And I was like, that might not have sounded like a compliment. So the ability to sort of train, non-practitioners to create really high quality video. I don't know where we're going to go, as the world starts to open back up. I know my visual storytelling team, they're desperate to get back out. They want to get out of the house. They need to go build the B-roll library. We want to go take shots of our bank and of customers. But I think there could be an element of video production that is going to not require as much out of house, support. I think there's a lot of things that can probably be done in-house for not a lot of money. You start to get your executives comfortable, you start to get people familiar with the technology, and I could see sort of an explosion there in the way that people are using video, and I think the user, whether it's our colleagues, whether it's our customers, there's a bit of an expectation there now, right? There's not an expectation, I guess I should say, that everything's going to need to be the Super Bowl ad, that some of this more authentic sort of shot from home stuff can be just as impactful as some of the highly produced content. So I think those are a couple things that I'm just seeing not only at TD but in some different industries.
Yeah. So you mentioned that quality of production is becoming more and more impactful thanks to the tool, and you guys are looking sometimes to bring that in-house. But also it's true for anyone with a phone now can produce very interesting piece of content that other people are likely to interact with. So tell us a little bit about influencer. Are you using them? Is it something you believe in? How do you see them fit in your world?
Well, my previous experience at Walmart, when you work with a retailer, influencers were much more a part of the strategy, whether it was the marketing strategy, whether it was the corp comm strategy. And for what I do in corporate communications and public affairs, influencers are not high on the priority list. You're usually, if we're not doing brand stories, then you're doing press releases, you're doing corporate announcements, and you may not need influencers for some of that stuff. But I think there are cases where when we're talking about financial advice or financial literacy, buying your first home, what you should be thinking about with a 401k. There are some credible people out there who do have audiences, and I think my sort of default approach to it has always been looking for micro influencers who have a much more intimate connection, who aren't just going from brand to brand to brand to product to product to product, but there's some deeper connection with TD. And TD is a unique brand in that our footprint is rather limited. We're from Maine to Florida. We're often thought of as one of the big banking centers, like a Bank of America or Chase or a Citi, but our footprint doesn't really allow us to be that big. And so when I've met people who say that they are a TD customer, it's a very strong connection. It's very meaningful, and they've been with TD for a long time. And if you can find people like that who are actual customers who then have some influence, that's where I think we look for the perfect marriage. And so we've done some things this year with the woman named the Budgetnista, who has done some things to support our Love and Money campaign. We had a new double up credit card that launched not too long ago where that kind of stuff works. But for the most part, I think when we're thinking about trying to tell brand stories through the eyes of our customers. I'm thinking in particular of Lambda Vodka, which we were able to tell of a same-sex couple up in Harlem who opened a vodka lounge in the height of the pandemic. They're influencers in their community, right? And so we've heard anecdotally that we've grown the business by telling their story. You know, they were very complimentary to TD and very complimentary about the fact that we have an entire team dedicated to helping grow LGBTQ2 plus businesses, and they moved all of their money over to Walmart, over to TD. And we've heard now from that business team that as people see the story and hear these guys' stories, that it's driving business. And so in some ways, that's like the accidental influencer, or you find like, hey, these two guys are absolutely amazing. They've got an entire community of people who are listening to what they say.
Okay. So earlier you mentioned that you were envious of some of the brands who were using TikTok, podcast, and other new channels and innovation. So can you tell us a little bit more about those brands that you are watching closely, that are innovating, that are leading the pack, that you really admire?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've always loved GE. I think that early on when they did GE reports and they did some crazy stuff in the podcasting space, they've done some interesting partnerships with like the New York Times and Spotify and really sort of getting into things early on. You know, I obviously don't work for any of these brands, so I can't speak to whether or not the content play help drive sales or whether it was to raise brand awareness, if it was just to build affinity. But, you know, GE is somebody that I've long looked at and, you know, wanted to be a lot like. It's hard not to love what P&G does. Thinking back to the Thank You Mom spot, to all of the things that they do now with diversity and inclusion, I think, you know, there's somebody that I look to all the time for creative inspiration. Ford, you know, I've really gotten into Ford over the last year and a half or so. I mean, the brand film that they did to launch the Bronco, you know, which is probably a trend we could probably talk an awful lot about, is the idea of brand films or brand documentaries. I consider it one of my somewhat failure at Walmart that I couldn't get it done before I left. We really had some really cool ideas for a brand film, brand documentary. So I love what Ford's doing with the new Mustang. I love what their CEO is doing on social. So I look to them. And then, you know, Starbucks, great storytelling. When I think back to the Upstanders series that they did, they put a ton of money into content, and I think it shows. So those are some ones off the top of my head that appeal to me. There's niche brands that sort of speak to my personal hobbies, whether it's cooking or whether it's golf or some other things. But, you know, that's more of how they address a fan, as opposed to some of these other brands who I think are probably using content to build new fans.
Awesome. And I love the design of the new Bronco. They did such a good job.
Yeah.
With the design. Really
yeah,
cool.
You know, and having watched Free Solo, you know, to get him to then be the director, I thought just really fit, right? Like, it's totally his lifestyle. You know, again, I think the word authentic probably gets overused when it comes to content, but it was really authentic. I was just sucked in by that piece and loved every minute of it.
Free Solo, amazing documentary. Just when you say the name, I have goosebumps. Those images of him.
My wife is terrified of heights, so I watched it alone. Nobody else in the family would watch it with me.
Makes sense. I want to ask a question and I want to make it very actionable for the audience. So this is more tactical, but can you share with us a few tips, maybe your top 3 tips to really create content that sells, content that's effective and efficient?
I don't think that you can begin to create effective or efficient content without knowing your audience. And so to me, what I've tried to do since I've gotten to TD, because TD was a lot like Walmart was, TD was really good at telling stories about itself. TD was really good at talking about, you know, its business priorities, but really, I think the sweet spot when it comes to content, whether it's content to build brand or whether it's content to sell, is that you've got to find where your brand's values and where your audience's values and needs intersect. And when you can speak to that sweet spot and you can create that content that helps, that's the content that sells. And content that sells sometimes doesn't do what you want it to. So when I think about audience, it's, who are they? What do they need? What are their concerns? So like we knew at Walmart there were some major reputational concerns that people had about the company. At TD, we've got a different set of concerns. It isn't as hardened, the opinions about us. So what are the concerns that we need? And then what's going to motivate them to buy? And in the case of a bank, is it opening an account? Is it taking out a loan? What is it? It's a different transaction, right, than sort of typical e-commerce. So I think that's the first thing that I start with is audience centricity. We are really trying to become data driven when it comes to storytelling, data driven content. And, a lot of times that goes counter to what your gut is telling you. You've got a ton of experience at Ogilvy and in social and a lot of other things. And I've got a ton of experience. And a lot of times we want our gut to be right. It's what's gotten us as far as it has in our careers. The data comes in, the data tells you something completely different, and you've got to do everything in your power to trust the data and go with the data. So I think that when we talk about effective content, it's knowing our audience, it's understanding what the data is saying about trends in our industry or what people are looking for. And then for me, it's about having the right process in place with our team. The content team, depending on where it sits in your organization, could sit in marketing, it could sit in corporate affairs, having a process in place, having guardrails so that we can create content through creative briefs and ideation briefs, and getting the content team at the table early enough in a corporate setting, I think is really important as well.
Thank you. And I love content that helps. Really cool. It's a really good
Yeah, I mean,
catchphrase.
look, we're all looking for something. And in my case, I've had my sink break this week. I had to get 4 new tires on my wife's car. My wife just put my phone in front of me because my voicemail wouldn't work when I upgraded iPhones. Like, I needed content that would help. I didn't need content that was going to sell me another iPhone. I didn't need content that was going to, sell me a new sink. I needed to know how to fix a clog. I needed to know, so like that content that helps, that understands what the user's looking for. It works in every industry. Eventually, it's going to lead to a transaction, but you got to figure out where somebody is in the funnel. And if it's just sort of top of the funnel building brand, is it more down the funnel to specific products, or is it then sort of closing the sale at the end? Understanding where somebody is in their journey and getting them the content that helps them wherever they are in that journey, I think is critical.
Yeah, I actually love the mindset of it because I think it's really audience first. It's an amazing way to always think about your audience as a starting point and really be helpful.
And unfortunately, I think in my experience in corporate America and talking to people in similar jobs in corporate America, I don't know that we always think of the audience first. You've got business goals and business objectives that you're trying to hit, and you got to remind folks all the time that we got to be thinking about our audience.
True. I think we have 12 minutes left, and I want to cover some of the questions from the audience. So there is one that is really interesting. The question is about the different type of strategy that you may apply to reach your e-commerce audience versus your in-store audience. How do you make them evolve differently?
Well, this last year has been really interesting. I think the previous panelists were having a bit of this conversation. So, TD, we're actually suffering a little bit of, fallout from COVID because TD Bank in the United States is known as America's most convenient bank. And when you can't open branches, and you can't be convenient, and you can't be open the longest hours, and you can't be open the most days, it really does dampen being America's most convenient bank. So there's a lot of that we want to try to reclaim, and how we get people back into the stores, which is what we call our locations, or if we're reaching them via mobile or digitally. There's an awful lot of conversation right now about what that looks like and what our customers are gonna sort of default to, and what their needs are going to be on the other side of this. And we've done a lot of stuff recently where one-on-one appointments have started to work, and there's a thought that we're going to bring back some of that and maybe move to that model, and then being more helpful through the call centers and through the online experience. So it's one of those things, Benjamin, that I think is still a little bit of a TBD as we're studying customer behaviors and starting to see trends and see, what's going to be the new norm on the other side. And for us, it's always been that in-store experience. We get huge marks from JD Power when it comes to the likability of our colleagues and the friendliness of our colleagues, and that's really what we're known for. When you talk to people who interact with TD Bank, and it was the first bank to allow dogs in the stores, and it was the first bank to do a lot of different things, and so we've always had that convenience. And when that convenience is taken out, what is that going to look like moving forward? And so I know that that's a sort of a hot topic of conversation around the virtual water cooler these days.
Awesome. Another question, quite meaty, probably a question from a brand strategist. It's about something we hear about more and more since COVID, brand purpose. How do you leverage brand purpose into your marketing? How do you come?
It's in everything that we do. And we were starting to see some of this before COVID. We had seen, the business roundtable, and we had seen some of the more, I don't know, I'm going to use the word progressive. That could be the wrong word, but some more of the progressive or forward-thinking CEOs really starting to put an emphasis on purpose over sales. And I don't remember the timeline. The business roundtable shortly before COVID, I think, had all of their CEOs sign a pledge about purpose being equal to returning value to shareholders. And so it's incredibly important for us at TD. I think it's incredibly important for every brand, because what we're seeing across a lot of different demographics is that people want to do business with somebody that they share an attachment to, an affinity to. And I think a lot of times that is now beyond the ease of the transaction, and it's more focused around, what do they stand for? Do they stand for the same sorts of things that we stand for? And so we're trying very hard when we tell our stories and when we carry it into then what marketing does, is making sure that that purpose is apparent all the time. And so how do you work your philanthropy? How do you work your your community partnerships into what you're doing? And as we're developing the strategy and we're thinking about how we're going to tell these stories, what's the right mix of business communications to D&I, social impact, community, and then how's the best way to tell those stories so that people understand what that purpose is, and what we stand for. And so it's absolutely critical. I wish I had a better answer than that, because I think back to you and I might have talked about this, but back when I was at Walmart, I went to an event where I realized that what I had previously thought my competitive set was like Target, Amazon, grocery stores or retailers. And I realized it's everybody. It's Ford and it's GE and it's whomever, because there's only so many people out there and they only have so much attention to pay to all of this content we're trying to put forward. And so now most every company out there is talking about its purpose and its values and what it believes in and what it does in the communities in which they operate. So it's a very crowded space. We're all trying to get people to connect with us. A lot of companies have sort of the same purpose and values, and we just really need to do as good a job as we can as weaving that through all of the content that we create.
Thank you. Another big, broad question from the public, but it's from on the other side of the spectrum. We talked about brand. This is more about e-commerce and the future of e-commerce. What are the challenges and opportunities that you foresee when you think about the future of e-commerce?
I am the wrong person to ask because I don't spend a lot of time in e-commerce. I sat in a corporate function at Walmart. I sit in a corporate function at TD, and before that, I was in government and politics, and so I have not really spent a lot of time thinking about e-commerce as a practitioner. I guess I think about e-commerce from the user perspective, and as I alluded to earlier. The COVID has brought on a lot of massive innovation, in retailers, from online car buying to, home delivery of groceries to sort of an explosion of like ghost kitchens because, they're going to deliver food and that's all they're going to do. So I don't have a great answer to this question. I don't know what the future is going to look like for the banking industry. I know the financial services and the fintechs. It's going to be a very competitive space. I don't know if people are going to start to move everything over to online banks, if they're going to start to move into the Robinhoods and the day trading kind of platforms. But it'll it's just going to be one of those things we watch and try to adapt as best we can.
Yeah, and I think being able to adapt is very important. And maybe one of the key lessons from COVID. Last question from the audience. It's about data. Someone would like to better understand how you utilize data, how you plan it, if you have specific tools to do that, a framework, something really actionable you can share with us.
Yeah, so I guess I can share two things in terms of, when I left Walmart, I thought we were, and I think they still are to this day, one of the leaders in using data, and whether it's first person data that they've got, whether it was then tracking how customers responded to content, and then whether it was driving basket size, whether it was having a noticeable increase in the company's perception and reputation. There were data pipes all over the company, and they were being fed into dashboards for every business line so that you could see what you needed and how it all came together to help inform business strategy. For us at TD, we're at the beginning of the journey. And so it's been interesting to sort of go backwards and try to solve a different problem, because the problem statement that we have, and the reason that we would want to get our hands on data, is to solve a different problem than what we were solving for at Walmart. We don't have the reputational baggage at TD that we had at Walmart. And so we're not trying to solve sort of these gigantic reputational problems. We're trying to shore up our reputation as a credible deliverer of financial advice. Like I said earlier, we've got to reclaim that title of America's most convenient bank. And so you're looking at data sets from customer anecdotals. You're looking at data sets from people who are engaging with your content to see if you are in fact shifting hearts and minds. And so I think there's sentiment analysis tools that we use for content. There are some of the old sort of first generation metrics that are still valuable directionally when you're looking at web traffic and web performance, but getting now under the hood and really understanding how you use a content intelligence platform, and then how do you tie what you're doing in corporate affairs, which is really, around owned and earned media. Most corporate affairs teams are not playing with the budgets that marketing does. And so paid is really more of the marketing team's responsibilities, but understanding the attribution modeling and the media mix modeling to see, what's the value of a press release? Did this earned media drive paid? Did it convert? So those are the sorts of things that we're trying to use data to solve. I think number one, using data to understand, is the content that we're creating performing the way that we want to and having the resonance that we want with our target audiences. And then two, we want to be able to use the data sets to be able to understand the full picture of what owned, earned, and paid looks like across the business. That's just as important for marketing as it is for us. And really, you say then, well, what do I need data for? Why do I need to prove it? Well, I think you need to be able to prove the value of your content to go get more money to create more content. So we like our content. We think our content is nice. We think it's doing the thing that we want it to, but we have no proof other than anecdotal. So you got to get the right data sets and the right, like I said earlier, the right content intelligence platform in place to tell us that, yeah, when people see this content, it is shaping hearts and minds, and it's then driving to conversions, because that's ultimately what we want, is to drive more consideration of TD and ultimately more accounts, more new customers, and retain the existing customers that we have.
Awesome. Well, we have 2 minutes left. Is there anything you would like to say to close this conversation that we would have missed?
Boy, that's an open-ended question. And as a talker, I could probably now, filibuster for the next hour on whatever topic I so choose. No, I think you and I have been able to cover off on a number of things. I hope this was valuable for everybody who's paying attention. I always am a little bit of the odd duck in these conversations. I'm not a marketer. I sit in a corporate communications function, but I do think that if marketers and corp comms got together more often and were more strategic in what they do, that whatever brands they work in would be better off for it, because they're different disciplines. But I think that when they're done in partnership and when they're done together, it drives fantastic outcomes.
Awesome. Thank you, Chad. It was extremely valuable. Thank you a lot for playing the game. It was great. And back to you, Lauren.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Benjamin. Yeah, thanks, Chad. We appreciate it. Nice to have you both with us.
Thanks.
Great. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. And for our next and last session of the day, I'm excited to bring to the stage Lauren Rice. Lauren is the Senior Manager of Brand Experience at Ferrera. And Lauren is going to be joined today by her moderator, Laura Johnston, the Managing Director and Executive Creative Director of VMLY&R Commerce. Hi, Lauren.
Hello, Lauren.
Hello, Lauren. Welcome to the stage.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Hi, Laura. Great to see you. Well, I'll let you guys have a chat, and I'll come back towards the end.
Okay, perfect. Thank
Great.
you. Well, as Lauren said, we have a lot of L's on this call, so you know it's going to be a great way to end the session, right? I'm Laura Johnston. I'm the Executive Creative Director, Managing Director at VMLY&R Commerce, and I am joined today by the amazing Lauren Rice, who is my client and Senior Manager of Brand Experience at Ferrera. So I hope all of you are ready for something sweet. We are going to talk about cookies. We are going to talk about candy. We are going to talk about commerce and culture and how all of those things fuse together. And I can't wait for you to hear some of the insights and learnings that Lauren and I have gone on this journey together, just discovering this changing nature of commerce and gaming and culture. And we'll walk through some of the many fun campaigns we've co-created together. So,
yes.
Lauren.
Great. Yes, thanks for having me. And as Laura said, I'm the Senior Brand Experience Manager at Ferrera, and I just want to let you know, while you might not be familiar with Ferrera overall, I'm sure you guys are really familiar with our diverse portfolio. We have nearly 35 brands, including Sweet Tarts, Trolley, Rocks, Black Forest, and Nerds in the confectionery space, and then Keebler and Famous Amos within the cookie space. So super excited to be here.
Yes, it's a broad portfolio of delightful things for sure. So in the interest of time, let's dig into it. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So, when we start out thinking about the future of commerce and marketing and what we could do, the possibilities for campaigns and shoppers and engagement almost seem limitless and endless. And we know that culture and gaming are going hand in hand with what's happening now commercially for brands, and particularly at Ferrera. And one of the things that's interesting is that the trends coming out of culture shape some of the commercial trends of how we sell and how we engage people. If you had to bet on one big trend for 2021, and in terms of culture and commerce, Lauren, what do you think is going to dominate?
Definitely. So one thing I think we've been seeing throughout the last year, and as we started 2021, is really all about going beyond the transaction to provide more value for the consumer. So as I mentioned, with Ferrera as a candy and cookies company, we're not only providing delight in every bite with our sweet snacks, but also trying to provide more than just a transactional value exchange within the purchase. So one thing that we've been seeing specifically is how do we connect our purchases in the digital space? So one quick example, this year, recently, we just launched our new Trolley Sour Gummy creations. So these are, our beloved Trolley candy brand, and it's a first little buildable sanded gummy. So you can build these lovely little alien creations. We have 7 different shapes, 6 different flavors to make over 200 customizable combinations. So while that's great, we knew that we needed to, even extend that experience to the consumer. So one thing we're doing is not only letting our shoppers play with their candy physically, but also in the digital space. So we created a virtual experience that encourages shoppers to go online, log all of their 216 alien combinations, and encourage them to, really have fun with it. So for us, we're seeing this as a really fun way to collect aliens and also, provide shoppers an incentive. So not only do they get to eat our candy and play with it, we're offering them an option to enter a sweepstakes and win. So when we're looking at this, it's beyond just that pure candy experience. It's creating something fun and engaging for them.
And I thought one of the things that was so interesting too about that that campaign was that it the digital engagement we allowed consumers sort of mirrored what the candy engagement was, right? So it had that authentic link of like, this is a candy, like you said, you play with, you build, there are over 216 different aliens you can create. And so we wanted to take that, honor that like brand intrinsic piece and then bring it into the digital engagement. And I've been really surprised at how many people are building and logging all 216 aliens.
Yes. This program is live right now, and I'd say right now exceeding our expectations. And we knew people like to play with their candy, but I think they probably like to play with it a little bit more than we even thought.
100%. So in thinking about this, we know that it's really important and that brands strive to run like impactful brand campaigns. Do you think brands, as we sort of emerge from this COVID situation and look to the future, do you think brands will continue to have to delight consumers in new and interesting ways? And how does Ferrara specifically plan to use digital engagement to help bring some of these experiences to life?
Cool. So starting with, do brands have to delay? I think 100% brands will continue having to delay. And I think we all know consumers are even becoming smarter about recognizing marketing. So we know when we're being marketed to, we know consumers are being bombarded with messages across all of their devices. If you look at studies, people are watching TV, playing on their iPhone, playing on their iPad, so constantly connected. So knowing that we do need to continue to delight. I'd say, like we talked about, digital engagement is a great way to continue going beyond that transaction and bring the brand experience to life. And one way that, that does kind of transcend marketing and make it feel more authentic is within that gaming audience. So once again, on our Trolley brand, we have activated in the gaming way and have seen phenomenal results. So for those who don't know about Trolley, the Trolley brand's a little different than your typical candy brand. So, starting with the packaging, we're in that dark black packaging, very different from the rest of the candy aisle, the bright candy aisle. And we knew that gamers are they want to engage in the space and are super into it and know when they're being marketed to. So truly in this campaign activation that we ran last fall, we did have to go, beyond that transaction and engage them with that digital engagement.
Yeah, and I thought what was interesting about that too is like the way that we did it, right? Like it wasn't just sponsoring a game, it wasn't just partnering with a gaming network or entity. We built our own game, right, and made the content bespoke for Trolley, and then we hid it in a place that was incredibly authentic. The deep web for gamers to try and find. I didn't know if you wanted to speak about that just a little bit.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. So to even make it more Trolley, it was not easily findable by search engines. So one thing that not only connected to that gaming audience, but made sure that we were ensuring purchase. So the only way to truly find this was to scan the code on pack. So once you scan the code on pack, you were able to enter this truly gaming experience. And to make it even more fun and a little bit more gamerized, if that's a word, you actually only had 10 minutes to play. So it wasn't that you could spend hours and hours playing, but you had 10 minutes. So a sense of urgency to make sure that you could complete the levels and move on. So for this, we saw that this was a phenomenal way to, actually encourage that repeat purchase. We were able to delight our shoppers with that candy, but also provide this escape in this fun gaming world. And when we did, so this campaign ran last fall, and we saw that this did 100% resonate with our audience. On average, people were spending almost 9 minutes of gameplay, which is completely unheard of, and multiple times the amount of time people spend on our social pages or even on our own website. And I'd say lastly, like we said, connecting it to buying that pack was really how we were able to drive that purchase. So we had, we can't disclose exact numbers, but we had super strong, in-market sales growth, both for our brands as well as the category this time. So, marrying up that, brand engagement and sales growth was truly like that perfect combination we were looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other piece of this that was amazing was if you rewind back to what was going on in fall, like candy is largely an impulse-driven purchase, right? It's something we pop into a drugstore or a C-store and go pick up to delight ourselves. And a lot of that wasn't happening last fall. So this engagement hit at exactly the right time to not only help get the lift without going into specifics that the brand needed, but it lifted the category as well at a time when people just weren't impulse buying. I think really speaks to the ingenuity of the digital engagement and how spot on it was for your consumer. So we stole a bit of people's attention, like almost 9 minutes worth, which is phenomenal. And that's something we're seeing like a shift in more and more. Sort of that ad-based revenue model that has dominated creative industries in the 21st century, right? That attention economy, awareness, attention, share. And it's really being slowly but surely replaced with what we're calling the creator economy, which is made up of more like platforms and marketplaces that sort of democratize creative expression, entrepreneurship. Brands are opening up a little and letting consumers participate more with them in unique ways. What role do you see that playing in your commercial initiatives? And do you see any of your brands adapting to this sort of paradigm shift from like awareness and attention to like creation and engagement?
This is 100% a cultural trend that we've been seeing specifically across a lot of our brands, but even more sometimes specifically for different brands. So for us, I think this, this creator economy and creative expression holds the most true when we're talking to, our brands that really resonate with Gen Z. So one example here is within our Sweet Tarts brand. So for those who don't know, I mean, Sweet Tarts has a long history, but Sweet Tarts, down to its name, stands for being more than one thing. So Sweet Tarts, a combination of sweet and tart, and that lines up, 100% to what we're seeing in this creative expression. So as we're celebrating uniqueness, duality, and being more than one thing, we know that our consumers are also looking for this. So one way, we kind of brought the creative economy to the masses was with our Sweet Tarts product last year that we launched to coincide with the release of Wonder Woman 84. So for those who aren't familiar, I mean, Wonder Woman is the iconic Marvel franchise that was launched. But in that movie, Wonder Woman holds the golden lasso of truth. And when we started thinking about, what's a great way for us to celebrate this uniqueness and duality within our consumers, this was a great fit for our Sweet Tarts brand with our Sweet Tarts ropes, which truly looks like a bit of a golden lasso of truth. So for us to do this, we created Sweet Tarts golden ropes that was truly that celebration of the product. But knowing that not only we wanted to celebrate, but we knew our consumers also wanted to kind of get in on the action. So here we launched with a Snapchat code on pack, which potentially, I mean, this was about 2 years ago, cutting edge at the time. We know technology continues to evolve, but Snapchat, while there's other technologies, it still is that really simple way to insert yourself and show your creative expression. So we had a Snap Lens that was letting you super self yourself. So you could really explore your alter ego, look like Superwoman or Wonder Woman, throw around the golden lasso and truly express themselves. So we were thrilled to see, the amount of people who engaged with that pack and that, super easy experience, but really letting people show their true expression versus just, quote unquote marketing to them.
Right. And that was a pretty successful platform for the brand. I wonder if you want to talk just a little bit about, without giving any corporate secrets away, like we continue to lean into that opportunity to turn brand assets, or in this case, like the Wonder Woman assets, over to consumers to play with. And I wonder if you wanted to talk a little bit about the Be Both Notes campaign that kind of dovetailed off of, as soon as Wonder Woman 84 kind of ended, we extended that idea of playing with the brand a little bit.
Yes, as we talked about, Sweet Tarts being more than one thing. And if you've seen any of our, TV commercials or other advertising, it's all about, ending with be both. So right now in market, we have a campaign called Be Both Notes. This is truly a program where you as the consumer get to customize and share your sentiments with other folks. So what we're asking people to do, scan the code on our displays. You're able to launch into a portal where you can truly create and send graphic digital notes to celebrate the uniqueness of your friends and peers. So we've given them a library to really unique graphics, fonts, expressions, just to quickly create something, share it with their friends and family, and really give them that jump starter content. So making sure it's authentic to what the candy is, it's rolling into people's lives in a short uplifting burst. So trying to make it easy, but let people truly have their own customization as well.
Yeah, I like that. I like what you said there about being authentic to what the product is and how people enjoy it. And it is that short little uplifting burst. And so in both those engagements, it was a quick way for people to create a little something, go a little bit deeper, but different than the trolley example that you talked about at the beginning of our conversation, right? Which was a much deeper, more involved, like it kind of intense experience. For Sweethearts, it made more sense to like delve into this creator economy, but do it in a way that was like a little more turnkey and a little simpler for people, yet still allowed them the freedom to play with the brand. And I think it's continues to be an interesting brand to think about in terms of that sort of creator situation. Well, I don't want to keep you too long, and I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for questions. I really appreciate, I know how busy you are with all of these different brands and programs that we're putting together, not only in market now, but in future execution. But in closing, I just wanted to get your thoughts and just quick snippet on, you know, what are you most excited about that you have on the horizon? I think you did a lovely job of recapping some of the programs that have been in market recently and how they start to demonstrate and chip away at the future of commerce, particularly in our category. But what are you excited for that's coming up on the horizon?
Yes, I think one thing I'm really excited about as we're looking to 21 and beyond is continuing and integrate, you know, commerce in ways that does good or makes a difference, not just for our consumers, but the world at large. We know that now more than ever, there's a consumer desire for brands, not to just be static things, but to be living participatory platforms. We know that people actually expect brands to react to things in the world and, you know, deliver on that promise. So I think for us, as we think through, you know, sometimes we say we're just candy and cookies, but we do know that things as small of a purchaser of candy and cookies can actually make a difference in the world. So for me, I'm excited. We have a continued partnership with Keebler and Make-A-Wish, where we've uncovered a consumer insight that our millennial parent target is really looking to support a cause they believe in. And Make-A-Wish and the great organization truly pairs with our Keebler brand of an elfin, spreading elfin magic. So I think for us, I'm just excited to continue to see these programs come to life, not only, you know, to engage with our brand fans, but also, you know, to do good in the world.
Yeah, it definitely has been a really fulfilling partnership. And it's pretty powerful when you can say that you helped, you know, lift a brand's volume and sales, but then at the same time, you were able to grant, you know, 25 wishes for Make-A-Wish Kids in Need. I think that leaves everybody with a very, very sweet taste in their mouths at the end of it. Well, I want to just thank you for all your time today and see if we have any questions from the audience, or if there's anything that you wanted Lauren to go into a bit more detail about. We have eat, slept, and breathed these programs, so they're very much second nature to us. But perhaps some of you out there have questions.
Definitely.
Oh, that's a good one. Are there any brand initiatives around Girl Scout cookies? I can speak to this a little bit, but maybe you could speak to it more deeply than I can, Lauren. Girl Scouts is an interesting, and I love that someone knows that Ferrara is one of the producers of famous Girl Scout cookies.
Yes, no, I can jump in. This is not as much my area of expertise, but 100%, yes, and I appreciate that people know about Ferrara and Girl Scout cookies.
Yeah.
So I will say, yeah, one brand initiative that, you know, launched this year for Girl Scout cookies, and I'd say, you know, we're at the tail end of Girl Scout cookie selling season, was that we launched, you know, virtual cookie booths. So, you know, people, you know, anyone throughout the country could, you know, support troops, one, not only in their backyards, but, you know, potentially if you know, you have kids or friends and families throughout the country, you could actually support them virtually by, you know, going online and either ordering cookies for yourself, which I did. I ordered a few too many boxes, or even donating to frontline workers. So I think that was a really unique pivot during COVID. And then in terms of the brand initiatives around Girl Scout cookies, like I said, right now it's more about the Girl Scout cookies business and us supporting them. So that was our key activation.
Yeah, and no small feat in the middle of COVID, when basically every way that you could have normally bought a Girl Scout cookie was taken away. I think it was a heroic effort on the part of Ferrara to build the cookie finder, to build the digital engagement, and allow you know, Girl Scouts to continue like with this amazingly important fundraiser, but do it in a totally new way, and to do it that quickly was no small effort. The next question, I don't know how much of this we can actually answer, but we can try. What new products are going to be supported in 2021? Maybe I'm going to leave that one with you.
Yeah. So I can jump in here. So the trolley gummy, sour gummy creations that I talked about, that is a new product launch for 2021. And as we talked about, that just went live this Q1, Q2. So that is a huge product launch that we're supporting in 2021. And then you mentioned what's next for Nerds as well. So I think if you're not familiar, so our Nerds brand has launched Nerds Gummy Clusters, which is actually our new product launch for 2021. It's flying off the shelves. So if you can find it on shelves, I would highly recommend you trying it. But yes, the Nerds Gummy Clusters is our new product launch supported in 21. We did support that with a bit of a commerce activation as well. The nerds as characters work together with their different traits of spontaneity, creativity, and logic. So to celebrate that launch of the Nerds Gummy Clusters, which is a very new to the world innovation, we actually launched invention stories that were able to, if you scan the displays, you were able to see these inventor stories of great inventions throughout time. And then also, if you follow us on social, we've been carrying those stories through in our social channels as well. So the Nerds Gummy Clusters and the Trolley Gummy Creations are our new products for 2021.
And if you're curious what a gummy cluster is, imagine like a little delicious gummy center that has been rolled or collected all the different flavors of Nerds candies on its exterior. So it's truly this, product embodiment of the Nerds brand positioning, which is sort of this perfectly imperfect together. They've literally brought all the nerds together around this little gummy cluster. And it really was a new to the world invention, hence this, our CTA, our call to action was, taste the crunchy, gummy, yummy invention. And then we supported that with a little bit of education because nerds do like to learn. They're curious about the world as their little characters, and did do some education around kind of unsung, interesting inventions throughout history. And we like to think that the gummy cluster is just the latest in a long line of wonderful inventions. I'm curious, when you say it's amazing, does that mean you've tried them? They are amazing. They're highly poppable and delicious. And I think Kylie Jenner is a big fan as well.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, very, very good.
I actually do see a question in the Q&A that I'd love to answer about engaging with your internal customers and your employees. So I think the question, I'll actually just read it. So how do you engage with your internal customers, your employees? So I actually think this is a great question, and a learning we've learned recently that we need to continue to celebrate our external activations with our employees. So I think one thing to notice, at a company like Ferrero, where we have brands that span the spectrum, as well as manufacturing employees, we actually like to just truly bring these experiences to our internal employees. So during the pandemic, with a lot of people working virtually, it's been a lot more of a virtual experience, but sometimes it's just as simple as, leveraging our internal social networks to share these things. So as an example, for Trolley and our gaming program last year, we actually had an internal competition within employees to see who could score the highest on each of the levels. If you took a screenshot and sent it into our internal social channel, you had a chance to win prizes. So I think that was just little things like prizes, whether it's prize packs with our brands, or potentially like a small low-level Amazon gift card. Those are things that actually get people really excited, and not only spreads the news about your programs throughout the organization, but really does encourage engagement. I'd say as we transition eventually back to more in-person or hybrid, one thing we do like to do is just celebrate the launches of these products and campaigns with internal events, whether it's just a tasting of all the products. So we would have all the Trolley and Nerds on the table in our conference rooms and in the headquarters, as well as extending to our places with our manufacturing. So we do like to just celebrate all the work that we've done. I think it's actually something we do think about at the beginning of a campaign of how are we going to quote unquote market this internally to make sure that people who don't touch the product know all the great news that we're doing.
Yeah, and I know that specifically around some of our tentpole holidays, like Halloween was a big, a big community event at Ferrara, and one that you would support here in Chicago, where your corporate headquarters are, by doing a lot of giving back of time and supporting different charities that could help bring Halloween to life around the city and make it delightful for everyone. And I'm sure that's something we're all looking forward to getting back to at some point. Someone also asked a really good and tough question in the Q&A, but what is your favorite campaign thus far in 2021? Although I think we could go back to 2020 if you want.
Yes. I mean, I think there's actually I mean, I'm blessed and fortunate to work on a bunch of different great brands and different campaigns as well. So actually we'll say one that we haven't touched on, but I do have a bit of heart for, is one that within our Black Forest brand. So for those who don't know, Black Forest gummy bears, but gummy bears and fruit snacks are, you know, within that space, we actually are like similar space to Make-A-Wish, really trying to do good for the world. So our Black Forest brand has actually recently announced a commitment to a long range target of planting 10 million trees by 2030. So got 9 more years to do it, but a super aspirational target of really standing for good for the world and good for you. So the commitment here is that on PAC this year, we were actually able to bring the virtual forest to people. So we partnered with the National Forest Foundation and launched what we were calling virtual forest tours. So if you scan your pack of fruit snacks or gummy bears, you can actually be transported to take a tour of one of our beautiful national forests. I think for me, I think this one, not only I think it's a great activation for our consumers, but it also just hit home for me, you know, as someone who likes to be out in nature and likes to be traveling. During the pandemic, a lot of that went on pause. So it's really great to be able to actually feel like you can see the virtual forest as well as learn about our products and really bring that experience and joy to people's lives. So that one, I think for me, is just something that resonated super strong.
And I love the mindful way also that you executed that program and thinking through, right? We did some interesting thing with displays around trying to make them a little bit more sustainable and being mindful of our footprint as a brand. While we're not perfect, you know, just keeping that in mind, pulling that same thought of good for you and your family and the world all the way through the execution is great. It's a great aspect of that. Well, I think we're almost at time. Are there any other questions? There are a lot in the chat.
Let's see. Yeah, there are a lot in the chat. I think that maybe one more. I think the one in terms of in-store and e-commerce strategies.
Yeah.
So question is, what are your brands currently doing in terms of your in-store and e-commerce strategies? And I mean, I think that's a fantastic question. I think one thing for us, I think that a lot of companies have noticed as well, is that, you know, the pace of e-commerce with the pandemic has just truly accelerated. I've seen estimates anywhere from you know, advancing us, you know, 1 or 3 to 5 years within the span of 1 year, and it could potentially be more. So for us, as we're thinking through, you know, in-store and e-commerce, you know, both do remain important channels for us. So, you know, as we're, you know, designing in-store displays to, you know, stop the shopper in their tracks, we're at the same time thinking about how do we stop them in that digital environment. So in that e-commerce environment. So that's anything from making sure we have, you know, content strategies lined up across you know, our brand pages, whether it's on, you know, specific retailers, as well as, you know, making sure the same packs that go in store are sold online. So we're trying to merge as much that experience that you're going to get when you take our product home, whether you bought it at a physical store or that you had it shipped to us. So I think that's just trying to make sure everyone's getting that same experience.
Hi, ladies.
Hello.
Great chat. Yeah, you can keep going if there's other questions that you want to answer. I know you guys got so many that came in.
There's one more. Can we answer one more, Lauren?
Yeah, sure.
I think it's really, I like this question about what do you see, and they asked it right at the top of our fireside chat without a fireplace. But what do we see as the biggest future challenge to retail and e-commerce, as well as the biggest opportunity? And I think we touched on this a little bit just in some of the program examples that we outlined. I'll answer first, and then maybe you can build on top of. But I would say, in partnering with you, I think, you know, 2 challenges are really interesting. I think there's a tension in our shopping behavior that has bifurcated it. Like, it is now a privilege and an honor to be able to go in a store and take your time and actually shop. So I'm curious about how that's going to impact the physical retail environment and make it even more delightful. Converse with that, on the opposite side of the spectrum, is this desire for personalization, customization, and incredible convenience. You can now add to cart from your previous purchases and have everything delivered to your doorstep in a snap. So there's this interesting bifurcation happening of both really rich experiences and then very, very streamlined, convenient experiences. And I think both of those present phenomenal opportunity for us as marketers to figure out, in this continually like bifurcated world, how do we appease both situations? That's just kind of how I see it. I don't know if you have a different opinion or want to build on that at all.
No, I think I 100% agree. I think we're getting so used to everything being convenient and at your fingertips. But there is this demand for getting out in the world and doing things. So I think there's an opportunity for brands when consumers are getting back out there. We can't disappoint them. We need to make sure we actually deliver on that experience, because I think consumers are going to have a lot of options, and if your brand doesn't connect with them, they're going to move on to the next one. So how can you remain convenient and relevant and meet the ever-changing and demanding needs?
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's kind of an exciting time to have to figure all this out.
Now I have a sweet tooth, so thank you for that. Love all of your products, Lauren, and I definitely think this conversation resonated. I actually got a text message from a colleague throughout and said, I had no idea, like, all of the things that they're doing right now. So yeah, I'm sure we'd love to have you back to talk about that more.
For sure. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Lauren. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Bye.
Have a great rest of the day.
You too.
All right, and that concludes our program. So special thank you to all of our speakers, from everyone at VMLY&R, Coca-Cola, Conagra, Dell, TD Bank, Ferrera. It was honestly a fantastic program, and we expect nothing less from our amazing partners at WPP. So thank you for being here today. We have a really busy week on the live cast front. So if you enjoyed today's programming, we welcome you to come back the rest of this week. We've got programs on everything from marketing innovation to multicultural marketing to future of TV, you name it. So check it out on our website. It's free to register.